Yes, you can share now. Sorry
All
about
right,
that.
no problem. Okay, so I'm just gonna share my screen. So when you open up Photoshop, so I'm just going to walk you guys through how to set up your workspace. And there are two other presenters on Photoshop, so it will gradually, develop and blossom. So when you first open Photoshop, you are on your home page, and the first thing you want to do is to create your workspace. So you can go ahead and click on create new. So every document is sized differently, and it's up to you to choose the size that you want. So if you're printing, you're going to have to figure out what sizes you need for your sheets. So I'm just going to select a size that I use for when I do flyers or anything like graphics for Instagram. So that's a 20 by 16 inch. But you can customize it on the right to be any width or height that you need, whether it's in the portrait or landscape orientation. And what you want to do is to pre-select artboards if you want to do more than one page or sheet. So you can do that, and you can name it, I'm just gonna name it CASA. And you make sure that everything over here is what you want it to be. So RGB color means that you get a range of colors. If you wanted a grayscale, you'd have to select that. But I'm gonna go ahead and hit create. So then you would, see your first artboard. So now you know how to set up your workspace. One thing you want to make sure is that your layers on the right are here, and you can see that the artboard has been created. Under the artboard, you have your first layer, which is your background, which is the white sheet here. You can use this box with the plus sign down to the right. It's what you use to create a new layer. So if you click on it, you see another layer, and you can turn layers on and off. And I'll explain later how it works. So now that you have your artboard, you can begin to kind of sort of set up your space. If your layers box isn't there, you can go into window, and this is how you customize your workspace. So whatever you need, you can click it here and it will appear. For example, if I deselect layers, it will disappear. And if I want to get it back, I go back and click it and it appears. So that's how you can customize your workspace depending on how you work. So that's one, how to set up the artboards and your workspace. So that's two things. Now, with architecture, I'm just gonna pull up an image that I have to kind of show you guys. So, one second. So this is how you represent your elevation. This is a style of how you can represent your elevation. And I can break it down to kind of explain how you can come up with this kind of composition. So, all right. So before the meeting, I had already downloaded some stuff just to put together to show you guys. So if you have an image that you want to bring into Photoshop from your documents, an easy way to do it is just to open your file and drag it in, and it will pop up. Now, when it pops up, you can see that the layer has been changed to whatever you had saved it as. You can customize and just say building one. Now that the building is on its own layer, you can turn it on or turn it off if you need it. If you wanted this building to be a bit bigger, you can make sure that the layer is selected, click on edit, free transform, and this is how you can manipulate the size after you bring it in. So I'm just gonna, that's good. This is good. All right. So if you wanted to create the ground level, you can use the brush tool. And the brush tool comes with regular brushes that are in Photoshop already. So you have the hard one, you have the soft edges one, you have a variety of brushes. And you can also manipulate the size and the hardness of these brushes by using these tools above. And you also want to rasterize, I'm sorry guys, you also want to rasterize the layout if you want the ground level to be on the same layout as the building. But I don't recommend it because you never know if you need to change something. So I would recommend you put it on a separate level layout, sorry, and then you can start to work. So I'm just gonna draw the ground level to show that it's on the ground, it's not floating. So a trick I learned when I was in high school was when you hold down shift, it will give you an automatic straight line instead of you trying to, freehand it, which would be really, really hard. Another way to do this is you can use the pen tool and you can select the points that you want and you can right click on it, and then you can select stroke path. And you can use any tool that is available on Photoshop to make a line. So you can either use your pencil tool or your brush tool, depending on what you want to achieve. And this will select anything that is selected under the brush level, which means if your brush is at a, like say 56 in size, that is what's gonna come up on the pen tool. So this should just duplicate the line that I made up there because it's under the same settings. And you can click escape or Control T to get rid of that line. And then there you have it. Why I said it's important to put things on different layers is because you can manipulate it without it affecting other things. So for example, if I was supposed to, let's say, erase the line, the building wouldn't be erased because it's on a separate level. Layer, sorry guys. So yes, I'm just gonna delete this second line because I don't need it. I was just showing you guys another way how to do it. There you go. Sorry guys, I'm not sure what happened. All right, there we go. So in the reference image, if we want to follow that style, let me just bring it back. If you wanted to create some sort of texture to represent the ground, you can do this using a brush. Now, you might not have the brush that you want in Photoshop loading already to give you a texture. So you can just go online and type in Photoshop brushes and you'll get a whole heap of websites that give you free ones. So I already researched this one up and it's a watercolor brush. I'm just going to go through the process of how you can bring it into Photoshop. First thing you want to do is download it, and it will take 5 seconds to download, and it will come in a zip file more than likely. And I'm just going to hit it in save, and then I'm going to open it in zip and show you how you bring it in from it being zipped to the brush file. So now that it's open, I have my zip reader here that came with my computer, and I'm gonna click on the brush. So the file would be this. You'd see the image beside it to the left side that would have the word brushes, and then you click extract to, and you select wherever you want to save that brush. For me, it's gonna be in my Photoshop file for CASA, and then I'm gonna go ahead and hit OK. So now that I've done that, I'm going to go into the file. And I'm gonna click on my brushes file here, and you can see that it's stored in my Photoshop file. So then you want to click on the brushes panel within Photoshop and hit brushes. And there's three bars. I don't know what you call that, but it's found to the right of the arrows. You click on that, and then you'd hit import brushes, and then it would pop up into the file that you saved it as, and then you find it, you locate it, you click on it, and you click load. And it's that simple to bring the brushes in, and it's now loaded into Photoshop, and you can select as a brush. So if I wanted to use this brush, and I'll obviously put that on another level, there, I will go in and I will hit brushes, and then I will look for it here. It's right here, and you can size it, and it will give you whatever design you want to accomplish. So I'm just using that as an example. that is it on a smaller scale. But if you wanted it to be like representing the sky, choose a nice blue color. And then you would make this brush kind of big so that it could cover the area. And then you can begin to put that in. So you can see that it's a little bit choppy, but it's just because I never made it big enough, which is fine. You can see that it's in front of the building and you don't want that. You want it to be behind of your building. So you can drag the layer and drop it behind the building. That brings the building forward and the sky in the back. You can use that same technique with any different type of brush texture. Bring the brush in and you can do brown level. So let me just select another color and you can do the browns. So maybe like a brown. Yeah. And just do that. And then, oh, I did it on a level. And then I will do that. So now I can clean it up without it affecting the sky. So I'll do that. And I'll go ahead and clear that. So you have, and if you might look a little bit dark, you can click on the layer that's the brown is on, and you can go to the opacity and you can turn it down if you wanted a more muted style. So the possibilities are endless in terms of how you graphically represent anything that you want to bring in. If the sky is too dark, you turn the opacity down, and there you go, you have a more muted sky. So now you think about, adding some life to your composition, and you can download it off the internet, your entourages, or you can hand draw them, but it's sometimes easier to just take it from the internet. So what I do is I just find them and I can just bring them in. And obviously, you don't want that background in there. You just want a simple tree. So what you can do is first you have to rasterize the layout. So that is right clicking on your layout and you'll be given all these options. You click on rasterize layout. Now you can manipulate the picture. You can use the magic wand tool to remove the background. So you click on it, hit delete, and it goes away. Control D to deselect. And then for your unwanted trees, you can just go ahead and erase them if that's what you want to do. So I'm going to choose this fancy tree up there. I'm just gonna erase the rest. Now I'm left with my one tree, and you can just drag it down. Now you can see that it is bigger than the building. You hit edit, free transform, and you can, sorry guys, my computer is freezing a little bit. I'm not sure what just happened, but I'm gonna see if that was open. Important note, guys, when you're working, save your work along the way. So I'm just gonna reopen Photoshop and load it in. Should be there, yeah. So we just have to bring back in the tree and repeat those steps. There. Rasterize layout, bring up to the front. Erase. I want the hard brush so I can get rid of it. And then we go, so I'll just do that. And I will keep my brush. Okay, so now that we have our tree, we can move it. And as I said before, it's bigger than the building. So let me just save before anything happens again. And click on a shortcut you can use is Control T if you don't want to continuously click on edit. So you Control T and you can kind of scale it based off of the height. And you can hit Control plus to zoom in so that you can work in closer detail. So I'll bring it down to size. And this looks more believable. And there you go. If you wanted to have multiple trees without having to repeat any of those steps, you can click on the tree, press Control C, Control V, another tree appears, and you can have it there. So that's a way to have multiple trees. You know, you can have it a forested area if that's what you want. And of course, you can manipulate opacity by picking opacity and turning it down if it's further back, bringing it brighter if it's closer to you. Another way, sorry. All right. So now that you have some trees, you want to put some people on it if that's what you wish. You can repeat the steps with the entourage, bring it in. I chose these. I like this style. Another way of doing it. So now these are, you know, they're smaller. You don't want to have to go through all of the steps of the tree. Another way is you can hit, let me rasterize the layer first, and then you can hit this marquee tool. And for instance, I'm just going to use the guy on the bicycle. I'm gonna select him, and then I can bring him out. And I can deselect him, use the wand, magic wand, delete the background, Control D to deselect that. And then I can move him anywhere really, just to put him in a composition to make it believable. And then I can just use my eraser tool. Wait, I have to click Control D and remove what I don't want. Now, if you wanted to do it for all of those, you could just duplicate the layer so that you have another one and you repeat the steps so that you can create your composition. So those are, okay, last one is, I'm just gonna turn down the, how intense these are. It's really intense. Okay. So if I wanted to have another sheet, like say I'm making, I'm doing my sheets for studio and I need another sheet. So you would use the artboard tool. So you could right click on the move tool and you'd see artboard tool and click on it. And then you should be able to create your artboard. So you have your plus sign. So you can either put it to the right, down below, to the left, up above. It doesn't matter. It's based off of your preference. So when you click on it, another artboard is created, and you can move between artboards to create whatever you're creating in terms of your cover page down to your last. And it doesn't matter if you click out of it. Let's say I hit escape or go back to the move tool, and the artboard is no longer there. All I need to do is right click, hit artboard again, click on the artboard, and it will appear. And I can continue the flow, go down if I want to the left. So that's how you have your sheets set out. And you can move in between them, and you use your layers in between artboards to create your composition. And don't forget to save. And yeah, I hope these tips help you guys when you're doing your sheets. The other presenters for Photoshop will dive deeper into, you know, photo manipulation and so forth. So thank you guys so much. I'm going to just hit save. And I also, if anyone would like some presets for your Photoshop layouts, you can drop your email in the CASA in the chat, and I will email you some presets so that when you're doing your sheets for studio, you don't, and you know, we run out of time sometimes, and to get a composition together is kind of hard. So I have these presets that you can download so that you just drop your images in as you go along. So if you guys want that, drop an email and I get them to you. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Krisan. humble.
No problem.
Right. So now, following Krisan, continuing on the point that she had last made regard on Photoshop. Oh, sorry, people. Matthew Parag will be continuing the presentation.
All right. Hi, everyone. Good night. My name is Matthew Parag. I'm in third year, and I love ArcViz. I've been doing it for perhaps the past 5 years or so. I started to practice on my own when I was at the end of high school. So it's been a pretty long journey, but I've gathered a few tips and tricks that I want to share with you guys today. And I'll be showcasing some projects that, well, one of them was actually showcased by Arcanine, which is one of the higher end ArcViz studios. They do work for Zaha Hadid and those big names. So I felt kind of honored when they featured me on their website. So I'll be showing that one. Sorry, I think I'm sharing the wrong screen. Are you guys able to see?
Yep.
All right, so I want to make this presentation interactive. So if at any point you guys have a question, you can stop me and I'll try to help. So this picture was a cabin that I did. This is even before CSA. This is way back before I knew anything about architecture. So from an architectural perspective, this building probably makes zero sense, but I think the image is pretty cool. It's somewhat realistic. So how I work in Photoshop is I kind of build up a story. I want to tell a mood in these renders, and it really takes a lot of layers to accomplish an image like this, and not to mention a lot of hours that went into a render like this. So I'm going to go through each layer. I'm going to reveal them one by one to show how we achieve this final outcome. All right, so the first image that I usually like to have at the very beginning of a render is the background. So here we have just a random image I found on Google Images. And I had designed the cabin knowing that I wanted it to be in some sort of woodlands scene. So it's really good to look for keywords that kind of match your design whenever you're searching for these types of images. So now that's the first image, right? The first layer. The next layer would be the actual design. You're building in whichever program you decide to render it in, you put that next. So this is what they call a base render. This was achieved in SketchUp and V-Ray. So V-Ray allows you to have very minute adjustments and render settings. It allows you to export different maps. I don't think I have the maps in this file right now. Oh, I do, but right, you can actually export different maps, meaning, so this is what they call this is a normal map that exports the raw image, the textures on the building, everything just comes in as one file, but you can break it down even further, and that helps with the different selection settings that Photoshop offers. And that really helps you to manipulate the image and get exactly what you're looking for. So I'll proceed with just revealing the layers to show you how I built it up. So it's very minute. You can hardly see the difference. But I'm trying to blend in the building to the background to make it sit on the side, to make it look convincing. So you kind of create some undulations. And that's one of the easiest ways you guys can achieve realism. It's all in the details. Again, very minute. If you look on this rim, I'm shaping the light to what I want it to look like. So as you can see, the light source is coming from the top right. So it needs to be represented on the building as well. Again, I just used our brush. So Chrisanne had given you guys some really good tips on the fundamentals of Photoshop, and you really need to grasp each tool to understand what exactly their role is in ArcViz. So as you see, I used a brush, a soft brush, to paint in light coming through these louvers. And obviously it matches up with the lighting on the top right. You can see it again. That's off. On and off, right? So back to what I was saying about V-Ray and how we can export different material maps. You'd use a map like this to, so you wanted to select, let's see. Right, so when I was painting the rim of that window, and I wanted to just select the metalwork and not the wood siding, right? I could activate this layer and use the magic wand selection tool. And once you click the color area, it should select everything, and you would then go back into your base render, you turn off the selection map, and then you could start painting in light. It's really that simple. So that's how these maps are useful. That was just a very small example, but you get the idea. The next step was to add some reflections to this glass. Well, there's supposed to be glass. Now we're going to add it. So you'd use the same image as your background, or if you can find a similar picture, you could use that as a reflection to create your glass. So there it is, that's the glass in there. Now, these are just some very small adjustments. I believe this is for an object that I'm going to be putting in later, so I'll turn those off. So a kind of funny story about this chair. I couldn't find any images, any PNG images of these kind of camping chairs. So I actually went to Amazon, and the same way that Chrisanne had taught you guys how to select and I mask the objects, that's what I had used. So you don't only have to go to Google Images, you could use Amazon or literally any type of image. You can manipulate it to your desire. So the chair is sitting on the ground, but it needs shadows. It's pretty complicated to explain this, but to sum it up, you could use the brush tool and kind of guesstimate where your shadow would fall. So as you can see, the render is really becoming something now. It's a mood that's developing. The next thing was to add the fireplace, just to kind of introduce some sort of activity or life to the image. Right here, we just make it a bit darker just to suit the scene. I'm gonna go a bit faster through this because I'm gonna spend forever explaining what. But I didn't end up using this in the end, but that was an option that I was looking at. Right, so again, using brushes. Brushes are gonna become your best friends whenever you're doing things like this. Right here, we just have a basic smoke brush that I just set it to the white color and painted it in. It looks believable, so it worked for me. Again, there's some very minor light adjustments. Once more, we just add some more context to the render. So if someone was sitting here and the fire was about to die, they could just walk over to these logs and just chuck it in the fire and it's going again. For the foreground now, foreground is very important because this is what creates depth in an image. If you have something really close to the camera, it will project the focus. Sorry, it will project the, what am I trying to say? It'll create depth essentially. So the building is our focus. We can blur subjects in the foreground to create the focus, right? So whenever you're adding images, you can't just leave it as it is. You need to tweak them through lighting, color, and saturation. So this might have come in like super saturated, very green, very vibrant, but it wouldn't have suited the overall aesthetic that I was achieving. So all of the layers that you introduce, they need to harmonize to look good. So this is an example that I'm talking about. I would darken these shrubs because we learned this in first year. Whenever something is in the foreground, there's more contrast. It's a sharper image, and so on. Just adding some other plants to the foreground right here. Same treatment. And we're almost at the end actually. Right here, I just wanted to create a bit more haze in the distance. And that actually adds to the depth again. This creates the atmosphere in the image. And right here, I would say we're about 90% complete. The only steps further would to be adding like some filters to the image just to get that final mood. So I use a program called Nick Collection. Well, I can't move the zoom thing at the top, but yeah, there's a filter program that you can download called Nick Collection, and it has presets, almost like when you're gonna upload an image to Instagram. You can choose different moods, and that is what it would look like at the end. Right. Any questions on this render? Or can I go ahead to the second one?
Sorry, what's the name of the program again?
Nick Collection, N-I-K Collection. I'll leave it in the chat for everyone to take a look at. All right, so this was a render that got me featured on Arc9's website. I don't know, to this day, I still have a fascination in shipping containers. So again, this is before CSA. It doesn't make sense, but I just thought it looked interesting. It was pretty fun to design. So start at the beginning, the background. Now, you can say something looks kind of funny about this picture. It's actually masked off. So if I were to disable the mask, this is what the image would actually look like. And masking, what it really is you're hiding parts of the image without actually erasing the data. So you can turn it on and off. You can add to it, you can add to it or subtract from it. But I only wanted the ground in this image. I didn't need the background. So I just masked it out. Again, we're just creating an environment using different layers. The next step was to widen it. Then just to lighten a few parts of it. Very small adjustments, guys. Sometimes they're barely noticeable, but when they accumulate, they make a huge difference. So now we have the background. And this is how, when you blend different layers, they can create an environment. With the mask tool, which is super powerful, I was able to do that. So that's it with the mask off. And that's it with the mask on. Unfortunately, I don't have the steps I made. I used to create this final or semi-final image right here. It came in from V-Ray and SketchUp as a really barren image, but I added these vines and the rust and the scratches to make it look weathered, just to make it more believable that it would sit in this context. So again, using the brush tool, because the ivy is like sitting on this extruded profile of the shipping container, it needs to look believable. Very simple way is to just use a brush. I'd set it to black and I had just painted it in. So it looks like the ivy is forming around the shipping container. So, right. Another step, as I had mentioned previously, was making the building look believable on the site. So I used a grass brush, and I masked out some of the building itself. So that's how I was able to kind of make the base of it look hidden in that foliage. Next step was working on the foreground. If you guys want to download these kinds of trees that are up close, you just type in tree corner PNGs on Google and you should find a bunch of them. Again, it creates a depth. It makes you feel like you're still under this canopy before you've been revealed into this open space. Then we add some more context, some rocks that look weathered, that have a ton of moss on them. Over here, just some raised floors, just to make the ground look less consistent. Another rock. More foreground elements. And then the man walking to the cabin. Again, you have to look at the direction of light in your render. So when I had imported this figure, it was flipped the other way around. But if you look carefully, the light is hitting him on this side. So I didn't need to do much editing to make him look like he was actually standing there. I added a few shadows to the foreground just to make it look like we're still underneath the canopy. And a parrot, just to add some life again. So you remember with the fire, that's how we added life to the scene. We added life to the scene this time with the man and the parrot. So again, about 90% done here. We just add some filters to create the final mood. Very subtle adjustments. And I just revised it a few more times. And again, you can see I'm adding some warmth to the image. It's a bit cold right now. Wanted it to become a bit warmer. I think I had removed these at the end. It became too warm, but yeah, that's essentially it. And that's our final image. This is how I went from literally just some random pictures like this from Google Images. And we eventually got here. And that would conclude my presentation. If you guys have any questions, you can ask them now, or I'll just move on to the next presenter.
Thank you so
Oh.
much.
I have a question.
Yeah,
Okay, so for example, if you find an image on the internet and everything and it's blurry, how would you increase the quality of the picture? If that's like you can't find the picture anywhere else, this is the picture you need. Is there a way to increase the quality and still use it?
there is a way. There are two ways. You could do it in Photoshop with, I believe it is the, you click on image right here, the image tab, and then image size. And you have some adjustments right here. The most important one I would suggest you adjust is the resolution. So you have, it's measured in pixels per inch, or you may know it as DPI, dots per inch. 300 is pretty high res, but some of them may come in, those low res images you're talking about, they come in like 72 pixels per inch. So the easiest way in Photoshop is to scale it using the resolution box. Or my preferred way is they have what they call neural, I think it's called neural filters. There's a website I use called bigjpeg.com, and it will take a while to upscale, but the quality is vastly superior to what Photoshop offers. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. If you could just drop the link to the website in the chat, I'd appreciate that.
Yeah, definitely. Is that it, guys, or any more questions?
Hey, I just wanted to say great image. I really like it. Remind me, you said it was a base rendering, just like the previous one?
Yeah, it was, but I didn't save the files. It was, I believe, merged. Everything was merged. So
Okay,
I
okay,
didn't
okay.
have those.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. But basically, your technique for these examples is basically rendering the main object or the focus model or a
Right.
building in some photorealistic application, and then you use Photoshop to really enhance the
To
visual.
enhance it.
Ah,
Correct.
okay. All right. That's
And
great
guys,
stuff.
it's not only V-Ray that you can do these things, and I believe Lumion offers the material maps, the ID maps, all of those things. They may look strange to you guys, but they're your friends, and it really is advisable to do research on how you can introduce them to your workflow, because it really speeds up the process.
I have a question. You mentioned
Right, who is that?
This is Jordan.
Oh, okay, Jordan. Yeah.
You introduced some like complex art-based concepts, but for
Okay.
students just getting into this, what resources would you recommend in terms of learning online, how to get results? Like what's
How
a
to get to
beginning,
this stage?
not to this stage, but like what's a beginner's entryway into art biz for students that are trying to start like second or third year students trying
Right.
to get into it?
So the easiest way I could recommend is a combination of two programs. Photoshop is really for what they call post-production, right? But you don't need to, post-production isn't necessary. It's really for fine-tuning. You can use your basic programs, SketchUp. My preference right now is a program called Enscape. It's really fast. It's a lot faster than Lumion. Your computer is more likely to manage it than Lumion as well. So in Enscape, it's real time, which is a huge advantage. You can take screenshots. For a beginner, I think it's ideal. It's a really good stepping stone. From there on, if you're still at the beginner stage and you want to get into the small edits in Photoshop, right? There are some websites such as cgtextures.com that they have the materials that you can apply to your SketchUp model. So if you're looking at a brick wall, you can just type in brick wall and it comes up. Materials are super important at any stage, whether you're a beginner, intermediate, or professional. But to summarize how a beginner can get into art viz, represent their work for school, I guess you could look at certain contexts such as trees. You want to download trees. You want to download entourage, whether it be humans, animals, it doesn't really matter. Adding context to the image is really what gives it life. You want to create libraries on your computer so that you don't have to be downloading these images over and over again. Sometimes you can reuse the same image in different renders. I think that's it for tips to beginners. YouTube is your friend. That's kind of where I learned it. So yeah, that's my advice to a beginner.
And just to add, I think a big part of why these images look so great is the composition. So I think photography resources, understanding how to compose a shot is
Absolutely.
also important.
Absolutely. So just being into photography is certainly an advantage to how you represent images in ArtViz, because at the end of the day, it's the same camera perspective that you're using. So whether it be rule of thirds, golden ratio, it will help you to understand how to manipulate those formats or whatever you call them. So yeah, don't just look at how to render, guys, look at how to take photos. You can have a super realistic render, but the composition isn't good and it will just ruin the whole image.
All right.
Any more questions? Yeah.
Thank you very much for the presentation, Matthew. It was quite informative. Just
All
to
right, thank
round
you.
just to round off the Photoshop section, Romain Marshall has joined, so he will be taking over to finish it off.
Hello, good night, everyone. I'll start sharing my screen.
Roman, could you introduce yourself and your past studies?
Oh, yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Romain Marshall, graduate from obviously the Caribbean School of Architecture. Currently out in the working world now, doing my own thing and here and there. I love art in general, architectural visualizations, drawing, all sorts of stuff, just artsy related, really and truly. I don't know if that's a good enough introduction.
Yes, this is perfect.
Okay, well, I'm just going to give you guys just a general overview of what I personally use Photoshop for. It's a little bit of everything, really and truly. It's my main, well, one of my main sketching programs between it and Procreate. But yes, I use it for sketching from just general concepting ideas all the way to portraits, which I can show you now. Give it a second. Yes. So self-portraits are just artwork in general, and even down to logo designs and presentation boards and all of that stuff. So Photoshop is really and truly diverse in its application. It can be used for still life painting all the way up to just general photo editing. It's really a general purpose type of software. But to kind of get into more so the nitty-gritty of the main topic that we're looking at, which is ArcViz. I can show you now how Photoshop comes into play in situations like that. So I guess we can start from overall contextual type shot that was done. So this is a visualization that I did. And it pretty much is just to give a general idea of where this site, this proposal is, where the site is and what's going on around it. So for this, it was just really just rendered in Corona Render in 3ds Max. And really the image was more or less like a blank slate. It was just like an empty void, and then I kind of superimposed a couple of buildings from a program called CAD Mapper. Well, it's not really a program, but it's an online resource per se. And it pretty much helps me to be able to get context relatively quickly without having to model it. So from there, everything is rendered and it's pretty much layered on top of one another, so to speak. So the main image in color, where I apply all the trees, the textures. I am the type of guy where some of the times I prefer to do certain things in 3D. So like the grass texture, what I could have done is I could have used what is called a mask, which I could then select the areas around the structures and then apply a grass texture, so to speak. So to give you a general idea of what that is, I'm going to give a quick demonstration. So this is pretty much just a selection that's then painted in. And then what can happen is I can then apply an effect, such as a pattern overlay. And from the pattern overlay, I can make custom ones or I can use pre-existing ones. And from there, I can scale it similarly to AutoCAD. So I can then apply this all over my scene in areas that I've selected, really and truly. So it helps to save a little bit of time rather than painting in the grass or, erasing around it. You can just have the general shapes drawn out already. Or if you're capable of doing it in the render program, you can render what is called a material ID or material mask. So this is an image which is an example of one. What it does is it just allows you to faster select certain areas of your 3D rendering, which allows for the photoshopping to happen a little bit easier. But yeah, pretty much for this, it's a very simple thing. The general outline exterior is pretty much just placed in black and white. It's like a Google Map image. I added text here and there, and then it's just general editing from the color balances to the brightness to the hue and saturation. So all of them is found under adjustments up here. So like, for example, with brightness and contrast, I either want to boost it, make it a little bit brighter, and maybe make it a little bit more contrasty to punch in some shadows. And the main idea behind this is to just pretty much get an image that is clear. So people can just have a general understanding of what you're trying to convey. Where is your structure? What is around it? And you place a lot of importance on just the general site. Moving on to another example. So the thing about Photoshop as well is that it's not only it can not only do more realistic renditions for architectural visualization, it can also do collages. So it's very varied, and it can be from hyper-realistic renditions to more collage-based ones, where you just take elements from different areas, across Google, and then compile them into a collage to kind of speak or say something about your work. Let's say, for example, in this one, I had just a SketchUp import of just this white model. It wasn't really anything, what would I call it now, too fancy. It was just really and truly just a SketchUp import. And then from there, I overlaid like a noise filter. Well, a noise filter and a paper texture. And then I also imported some line works from SketchUp and inverted those to white to help punch things out a little bit more. Most of these little smudges and marks that you see here is pretty much just a brush that's been applied all over the scene to kind of add a little bit more grit and texture, so it's a little bit more visually pleasing. And from there, subtle things here and there are added in, like I darken the road. I used a PNG of a road and just drop it over to add a little bit more grit and texture. Then for the grassy areas, I started to copy in like a grass image and then copy that all over that little patch here. And then I used a brush to kind of help me fill it out and let it feel a little bit more luscious. Then I added trees here, there, and darkened the base of the roots to kind of just add that extra shadow, and added a little bit of, what I call ambient occlusion that adds a little bit of realism to the scene itself. And from there, it's just really and truly the use of masks here and there to darken certain things, add certain things. I can use also a black soft round brush to also add dark areas into the scene. And that can just help to create shadows or make shadows darker, punch things out a little bit more. You can either create them on a separate layer and turn on the opacity, or you can play around with the opacity of the brush itself and also a little bit of with the flow. Moving into something else that's a little bit more realistic per se. This is also another example, an application in a section actually. For this one, it's pretty much more a lot of the same, where it's just adding entourage to make the thing, adding human scale and let the images feel a little bit lived in, adding a little bit of context on the exterior, a little pop of color to signify that this doesn't exist in a white void, but there is a space behind it. Adding shadows, adding, a little bit of this bloom effect to kind of let it pop a little bit more and let the colors be a little bit more vibrant, so to speak. I guess another example would be not this one. Sorry guys, I have quite a few projects open. So yeah, this one is a little bit more where it's mostly heavily rendered in 3D. But the benefit of this is, well, what I normally do with Photoshop is I always touch up the images no matter what. It's always important that while you might, go through the processes in 3D to let your images have a specific look even before they get to Photoshop. Some of the time there are certain elements that the program might not render out properly, whether the image is a little bit more noisy or whether certain textures didn't come out exactly the way you want, or there's a lot of tiling, or if you needed entourage, but adding 3D people to the scene would have taken a little bit longer for it to render. In this instance, however, it's just the image, and what I did to it is mainly just a few little things to kind of pop the image and help you focus on the image a little bit more. So what do I mean by that is composition is very important when it comes on to ArcViz. You want to know like what is the main target that your audience is trying to focus on. So I'm using guides right now to kind of give you a general idea of what I was trying to keep in view of the viewer. So the main object with the most weight to the left is the building itself. But also not only having something that's visually heavy, you need a little bit of breathing room around the image. So within the edits as well, even though they're subtle, I try to add things here and there to kind of help pop that out a little bit more. So over here at this layer, what I've done is this is pretty much just an adjustment layer, which is just a curve. And what the curve does is it pushes your highlights and well, it can push your highlights to be a little bit brighter, or it can compress the shadows and let them be a little bit darker. So in an extreme case like this, you can see where the further down I push it, the darker the image gets. And the higher I push it, the lighter the image gets. But what I've done is that sometimes I don't necessarily want it to affect the image overall. So what I do sometimes is I add a mask to help kind of keep certain areas in focus. So for example, I highlight the specific area, I select the area, I feather the area, and this allows me to kind of pick the location of where I want to be in focus. And then I can add an adjustment layer with that mask already applied, and whatever changes I make usually applies to that area of focus. So that's actually a way that you can use to kind of help you push your images or add a story to them. Like you want this specific spot to just be like, the money, well, not really the money shot, but just the piece of the artwork that you want to say, hey, this is what I want y'all to look at. This is what I want y'all to stare at. And you can also do it inversely where you can invert the mask and also highlight the area around to make things a little bit more interesting in the surrounding areas. Otherwise, though, it's subtle little changes here and there with the colors. So the main things that I normally do is I either edit the brightness and contrast. Sometimes I prefer my shadows to be a little bit more punchy, so I just bump up the contrast, and maybe sometimes I want the image to be a little bit brighter depending on how dark the image came out. And levels is pretty much just an adjustment to it pretty much retains both the highlights and the shadows, and it's pretty much to fine tune the image until it gets to that visual perfection, so to speak. Another example is more so adding entourage to your renders, which can also help impact the renders significantly. So in this instance, the render was mainly just like an empty scene, really. But I thought, okay, then I obviously want this to feel like it's been lived in some sense. And there were certain areas here there with the image as well that I didn't like how they came out. So this is another the example of the material ID masks that I told you that can be rendered out from some 3D render programs, well, usually most of them, that allows me to pretty much use the Magic Wand tool and just go in and select certain areas. So by doing that, it can allow me to actually, as I showed before, edit specific masks or certain areas within the image itself, and just either brighten objects or darken objects, because as I say, sometimes the render engines don't properly represent the materials the way you want them, and sometimes you just have to go back in and just edit it until it looks visually right. But it's also very useful in terms of adding entourage to your scene, because by using it, it can help you to kind of cut out certain elements a little bit easier, because you have an actual selection that you can make rather than using the polygonal lasso tool to draw in, because sometimes it might not draw the exact way you want or draw straight. So you sometimes have to go in and use the Magic Wand and the material ID mask to pretty much capture what you need to capture to then erase it out of the scene. And also using masks, again, you can, apply effects to your renders. Like this, for example, it was a guy that was just pretty much walking, but I wanted to convey motion in the render to kind of capture the eye and say, hey guys, this is something that's interesting that's happening back there. So I added a filter, which is a blur filter, and it's a motion blur filter. So what it does is it takes the pixels and kind of smears or smudges, and you can choose the direction of the smudge, and that kind of allows you to show the direction that the object is moving in. So it helps your renders because it's adding a little bit of movement and vibrancy in it. Also, by doing this as well, you can also add in people, use a mask to help you cut out certain parts of the entourage, so to speak, to allow them to integrate into the scenes a little bit better. And what you can do as well is just use the paintbrush tool to add in highlights, or another feature that I recently discovered is the burn and dodge, which is tools that are similar to like adding highlights and shadows. The burn tool does is it just darkens a particular area, and the dodge tool pretty much brightens a particular area. So it acts in a similar fashion to the adjustment layers. It's just that it's tied to more so a brush, so you can choose specific areas that you want to add highlights to, and specific areas that you want to darken a little bit more. But yeah, and occasionally as well, a thing that I like to do with renders to check if they feel a little bit more realistic, or if I'm feeling at certain aspects of the image, I like to apply a black and white filter, because if the image itself works in black and white, then it will work in color as well. It's a thing I like to do. It works for me. And it kind of helps me to see any mistakes as well, that maybe I want to come in and get rid of a little bit of white on the cutout, and sometimes I might want to edit the material, so I let them value wise appear a little bit either darker or lighter. You can also use other little subtle things with Photoshop to add a little bit of realism to the scenes as well. So in this instance, I wanted to add entourage, but in the scene itself, there was the issue of this highly reflective material, and also, subtle things like, say, the steam coming out of the pot. It's just really, subtle little minute changes that kind of help to tell a story and allow your scene to feel like it's being lived in or being used. So in this instance, it's just pretty much I added in the entourage first, and I realized that, hey, I needed that reflection. So it's just really and truly going in, making a copy of your entourage and applying a filter like a Gaussian blur filter, which kind of, blurs the entourage out. And then you can just apply layer effects like overlay or screen. Usually I use overlay, and then you can put them over on top of any reflected surfaces, and it gives that subtle look and feel that the object is reflecting reflecting on that particular surface. So it's a thing that helps to bring a little bit of realism into the scene. I also like to go in with some of the entourage, and as I said before, use the burn and dodge tool, and add a little bit of shadows to certain crevices, to push the realism a little bit more, to let it feel like he's casting a shadow while sitting on the floor, subtle little things like that to help push the image. And it's pretty much a similar instance with, like, say, the steam over on the pot, is just finding a PNG image of steam and just adding that over, and then using a layer adjustment, such as screen or lighten or overlay. Sometimes it's better to try them to see which one works best, but sometimes screen with transparent objects works a little bit better and integrates into the scene a little bit nicer. You can also use it for lights, like the lens glare and little things like that. So yeah, so that's pretty much like a general way of doing things in Photoshop. How I approach it from ArcViz all the way down to simple photo edits. So yeah.
Thank you very much, Romain. Mr. Mr.
Hold on, do we
William.
have any questions? Don't be shy. Okay, sorry. You can go ahead.
Right, I was just asking if Mr. Williams, if you and your associate are ready now.
Good timing. Definitely. She's ready and waiting. Funny enough, some of the points that I'm even going to raise would be great for a kind of overview. But guess what? Based on time, I have to do my stuff now. So what you can do is just consider some aspects of what I'm saying after you've heard Illustrator is next, I believe.
Yes, and Procreate.
All right, and Procreate, so you have 2 left. That's right. Okay. All right, so most of you guys here know me, everybody here. So I am Mr. Brian Williams. I do lecture most computer courses. By profession, I'm a visualization specialist, also a past member from CASA, graduated the bachelor's and the master's. And I currently operate a visualization practice in Jamaica, right? So I'm just glad to see all of these skills being displayed. Very nice stuff. I'm enjoying the presentation from you guys. I know some of the persons here, and it's just overall great work, right? Feeling very proud. And I'm sure there are persons here feeling also motivated. So what I'm going to quickly do, most of you perhaps know that I lecture on some of these things. So I'm going to just take a piece of what I normally lecture on, and then I'm going to, remix it a bit to target primarily, especially CSA, persons in CSA, whether it's at the undergrad or master's level, and formulate it in some tips and kind of wrap that up in how InDesign can be used. Now, additionally, I have the little bonus content for you guys. I have Miss Nicole Williams here, and I am by no means an InDesign expert. As a matter of fact, I'm not an expert on any software. But she's actually, I would call her an expert, and she's in the field of publishing. So I asked her to just give a 5-minute demo of just one article in a magazine that she's worked on. So that is coming up. Nick, are you here? I'm looking in the list. Give me a holler.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, all right, great. All right, so I'm gonna just go first real quick. and I'm going to try to be within the time. All right, so I guess I have permission to share my screen. So let me get that. Let's move these windows around. And we're sharing the main screen. All right, everybody can see the screen good enough?
Yes, sir, it's clear.
All right, I feel like I'm in a class at 8:30. Anyway, going quickly. Now, some of you know this stuff already, but I'm just going to do a quick overview. I realize that InDesign is not really so popular as Photoshop or as Illustrator, but I'm glad that I get the opportunity to kind of just highlight some of the features of InDesign. So InDesign is a desktop publishing software, right? What is desktop publishing? Basically integrating text and graphics. Now, some of you might say, well, Photoshop integrates text and graphics, and Illustrator integrates text and graphics. As a matter of fact, Microsoft Word integrates text and graphics too. But the main difference with InDesign, you can kind of think of it. Most of us here know about the term BIM and about how BIM kind of merges the industry together, architecture and construction and even ArchViz, but it merges all of this together under one area. And that is kind of like what desktop publishing does. It merges things like the design and the print and the editor and all of these together. It's you know, kind of like the Avengers of graphic design, so to speak. One thing it is not is that it is not a word processing application. Desktop publishing is like the big brother to word processing, right? And you know, not to go in too much detail, but we kind of started at word processing and now we are at desktop publishing. And even if you just glimpse the kind of workflow that it takes to produce a document versus produce a document using desktop publishing, you can see there are many more steps and iterations and evaluations that is in the process. So desktop publishing is pretty just a more robust presentation of text and graphics, right? It has many different modes of output, not just for print media, not just for booklets. And as we will see, also it has great use for us in architecture as well, right? Think of it as a more complex, you could think of it as having more features than what the typical word processor gives you. Now, I know that sometimes when we have to deal with a lot of text, some of us might default to, well, just do it in Word. But this is the thing that I want to get to you guys, is that the Office applications and the main difference with the, let's use Adobe, for example, because there are many more, but let's use Adobe since we're in the Adobe vibe. The applications such as Illustrator and Photoshop and InDesign are meant for designers. And pretty much most persons that are here in this room are designers. It gives us more flexibility to flex our design muscles. So I always say, well, to my students and everybody in the design field, that I shouldn't be seeing you using Office related applications. I should see you using more design related applications, even though head to head, both of these applications could build that flyer there that you see on screen. Those who are advocates for Office would say, Mr. Williams, I can use Word and do a wicked flyer or a wicked sheet outline, right? I have never forgotten the client that gave me his floor plan in Microsoft Excel for me to do a rendering of it. And yep, I said Excel. So it is pretty much possible to bend any program to your bidding, even if it is primarily meant for a primary purpose. So what I want to focus on now is kind of the purpose of InDesign, right? So that we don't try to bend an application to do too much things that could otherwise be done in another application, right? And most of the features and tools that are unique to a desktop publishing software, by the way, which is not just InDesign, but there is also Quark and there's also Microsoft Publisher, right? But you will find some similarities between them. They're able to have things like frames, and it is really in an effort to help you to frame out documents. Now, InDesign is a champion for documents and text layout, right? Yes, yes, Office can use text. Yes, Photoshop can use text. Yes, Illustrator can use text. But when you're dealing with a, let's call it an army of text or an army of pages, and you are a designer, InDesign should be your first go-to point. It has features for you to create pages and to do what's called pagination, which is basically the ability to arrange pages. So when you fold them and staple them in the middle, they're automatically organized. I mean, if you try to do that in Word, you will basically tear your hair out. However, it does have vector editing tools, which you guys would probably hear about next. You heard about raster or image editing tools using pixels and doing all kind of blurs and fades and stuff like that. In the world of vector editing, which we exist in this architectural field, because we use vectors to draw floor plans and all these things. These are some of the tools that we would be familiar with. Tools like the line tool, the pen tool, and lines and shapes. These are things that we use every day in our field. So I also want to spend some time to tell you about the integration, because before I even open the application, to just give you a quick snip at InDesign, the truth of the matter is you don't really need to use InDesign as such. InDesign is kind of just the delivery mechanism for doing the heavy lifting in most other applications, right? Which some of you probably already know. So you saw some heavy lifting in Photoshop. You saw some beautiful rendered images, which are absolutely great. And you saw editing with, which is a little bit more advanced, compositing using, like render passes and all that stuff. Those heavy lifting are done in Photoshop. And I'm sure, is it Miss Ronnie, right? Another Illustrator queen, she will show you some heavy lifting in Illustrator as well. Well, the idea is that when you do those heavy lifting of producing the content with these applications, you put them together in InDesign in order to produce your to publish your document. And when I say publish, it doesn't always mean print, but it also means digital as well. So in the traditional sense, and this is why I'm glad that Miss Nicole Williams is here, she can give us a kind of traditional point of view of how InDesign is used. And then what we're going to do is take a piece of that and just apply it in our architectural realm. And I'm going to kind of negotiate the discussion closer towards especially CSA students and how you guys can benefit from this. So in the traditional environment that InDesign is using, you usually have a combination of writers, editors, and then you have artists. And one such artist is Nicole Williams. And I'm just going to ask her to, I think this is a good point to interject, right? And if you could just, well, let me stop sharing my screen so you can share your screen. It's only going to be about 5 minutes. All right, guys. Nick, you there?
Yeah, I'm here. 1 second.
All right, you're getting your screen ready. So while you get your screen ready, just to let you know that typically the way how Illustrator is used for desktop publishing, usually you have persons focus on writing, persons focus on editing, and persons focus on designing. Kind of similar to maybe an architectural firm where maybe you have somebody that's, you know, working with the presentation versus somebody who is working, you know, technically on the plans and so forth. It's kind of similar. Now, after we look at how this works, then we look at how we can apply it in our field. And then I can even bring up just 1 or 2 examples to just kind of give you a little feel for what the interface looks like. All right. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen now. Nick?
Yeah, I'm here. Can
All right.
can everyone see my screen?
Hold on. No, I need to stop first.
Oh.
Okay, you're on.
All right, so everyone can see my screen now?
Yes.
All right, good night, everyone. My name is Nicole Williams. I am currently a senior graphic designer at the publishing company Pelican Publishers Limited for 9 years now. I've been a freelance designer for over 11 years now. I have worked on books such as the Grace 50th anniversary book, that you can see this red book right here. And I've worked on magazines such as the Jazz and Blues magazine. So the magazine that I will be talking about is the Places and Spaces magazine. So I chose this magazine because it's in relation to the architectural field. So this is a real estate magazine that features various unique properties throughout Jamaica. So I'm going to give a short explanation of how I designed the feature article. So I'm just scrolling through right now to go to this feature article that I'll be talking more about. So this is the feature article. So my approach that I take to designing is, firstly, the images and the text are supplied by the editor-in-chief to do the article layout design. So when I'm doing the feature article design, these are the steps that I do. Firstly, I read the article to help to select the best relevant pictures for each section of the article. This picture that I chose for the starter page of the article showcases the featured property at its best and also keeps the reader's interest. The fonts that I chose are also used throughout the entire magazine. I use the principles of design to determine the layout of the images first, and then I allow the text to flow around the images. The colors that are selected are chosen in harmony with the colors of the images. I use these colors in the job caps, which are the large letters in text, along with pull quotes. So I use colors in the job cap and in the pull quotes right here. Pull quotes are just highlighted text that are separate from the main text. And these elements are used to create interest and also for the reader to want to continue and reading the rest of the article. So that's the main feature. I'm just going to show another spread. This is for another magazine. This is for the Jazz and Blues magazine that I worked on. So this is one of the feature articles that also uses the steps that I talked about in the first, from the first magazine concept. So the same, I chose relevant images, I use colors to create the harmony and bring everything together. And the pull quote is up here. So there are different elements on the page to create interest along with the text. And the text flows along with the images.
All right. That's great stuff. This is one of my favorite pieces. I just love the way how the image is just like flowing out of the little jazz symbol there.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. All right, guys. So this is awesome stuff. Now, so what you can do, Nick, just stop sharing your screen, but keep your stuff on screen just in case I want to come back to you. I'll just jump
Okay.
back to my screen here. All right. Everybody can see my screen, okay?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
All right, cool. All right, so now most of the images and the text and those lovely compositions that you saw there, notice how it has a kind of feature and direction towards laying out bodies of text, but also other information. In that case, it was photos, but for us, it's a combination of illustration and drawings and sketches and all these things. So already you can kind of see how the relation comes together. Now, remember what I said earlier, InDesign is really pulling the heavy weightlifting from those other graphic, 2D graphic visualization apps done with Photoshop and Illustrator. The key thing here, the key trap that you don't want to fall in with any software, but especially with InDesign, is you don't want to try and bend it to do something that it is really not meant to do. And what I have here is just some quick bullet points. I got it from 99designs.com, which is great. I always go to that site that gives some great use case scenarios. Because, I mean, you know, yes, you can, as I said, you can use one program to do something else, but there's always one that it's best slated for. So things like editing photos and doing artwork and mockups and that stuff is for Photoshop, and things like logos and icons and one-page documents. Hey, look at this, one-page documents. I mean, it didn't even say you can do documents in Photoshop, which you can, right? I know there are Photoshop fans here, right? Which they do multi-page documents in Photoshop. That's great. But then InDesign just does that like, you know, like easy breezy. So let's skip ahead here. So you basically want to use Photoshop when you want to do retouching and color correcting. You want to use things like blur and smudge and scan and composite images. You need to use a different app when you're dealing with lots of text or when you need to create a logo, for example. And this is because a logo is going to be used in multiple scenarios. So you don't want to use it with, the term is resolution dependent program, meaning you can't resize it to whatever size you want. I know Illustrator is coming up next, but you know, just kind of remember this after the Illustrator presentation, right? So you use Illustrator when you need to create like logos or icons or design like a book cover. You need to create floor plans and colored elevations, or you need to lay out architectural sheets, right? Use a different app when you need to edit images. When you need to do multi-page documents, use a different app, all right? And you use InDesign when you need to lay out a multi-page document, right? That has a lot of text, or prepare multi-page prints. I mean, if you just look at even the list of Illustrator and Photoshop, it's like a heavy list, which that's why I'm saying they do heavy lifting. InDesign doesn't really need to do that much heavy lifting. It just needs to present what was done in the other applications on a platter, right? And that's the real purpose of it. Now, because you're doing layouts, if you remember some of the fundamentals of design principles that Nicole mentioned just a while ago, you know, how does she lay out the text and the documents and things like that? All of that is driven by the elements of design. And I'm not going to play this video now, you know. I played for some of you already, so hopefully you remember. But these are there's some great tips and the elements of design. And can I tell you guys a secret? Most of us who are artists, you know, whether it's computer graphic artists or maybe we're, you know, architectural visual specialists, some of us know this stuff already and we just do it naturally, right? We know that if we use a certain color with another color, it goes well together. We know that if we space things out a little bit, it works. But when you're using InDesign, this is where that knowledge needs to shine, because it's all about layout. You're not really using InDesign to build things and to smudge and erase and to, you know, draw floor plans and those things. You can, right? And it's not completely illegal to do it in other applications, but you're primarily using it to the layout. So these things here and here, you know, things like color and space and texture and shape, these things become important. All right, so that's just a quick run through of that. Now, I do have 2 little examples to show you here. Let's go. Right, now, some of you might be familiar with some of these things because I actually just teach a quick introduction to using InDesign. Here we go. So I have here just a quick kind of board that I put together just to let you understand how InDesign fits in the architectural sphere, right? So now you can use InDesign, and it's primarily used with documents. Now, some of you might use InDesign for presentation sheet layout, and yes, it can be used, but in specific ways, or it's recommended to use it in specific ways, right? For documents, definitely 100%. If you need to do a portfolio, you need to do a project, anything with multi-page documents, you want to draw for your InDesign, most definitely. However, when you're putting your architectural presentations together, whether you're doing a document or a sheet or a sheet layout, the first thing you want to do is organize yourselves. Notice I didn't jump and say, oh, just jump in Illustrator or InDesign or whatever. No, you need to organize yourself. So you need to determine, you know, what elements do I need to include in this document, you know, and definitely need to write it down. Because especially when you're in InDesign, you will be needing to position these elements, and you don't want to position stuff that you don't need. And let me tell you guys, as designers, sometimes we tend to get caught up in the visual dreamland, right? And we give this really beautiful presentation, but then we're missing the North Arrow. Right? Sounds familiar to anyone? So, you know, you want to make sure you have this list down before you even start to draw a frame in InDesign. Next, before you even go further, you need to decide if you need to break these things down. So maybe you know that, okay, I need to do a site plan, but then do you need to now define what in the site plan I need to show? Do I need to show a location and all of these things? Do I need to show parking and grass and all of these things? Now, one tip that I want you to remember, especially in architecture school, is that, and in architecture in general, in architecture, it's an art and it's a science. It's not completely a science. So most times you don't need to communicate every single little thing, every nut, every bolt, every grass crete, every car, every bird in the sky. Most times you just need to be strategic with what you're presenting. And this is what that list allows you to do before you start to pile on everything in your InDesign document. So, you know, you decide, do I really need to show the service, or do I really need to show the entry and egress and blah, blah, blah. So it helps you to kind of filter these things down as just individual items. In most cases, you don't need to show everything. You just need to communicate your design as much as possible. And I will bring up another point later. So the next thing you won't need to decide is what is the format of your presentation, right? Because the truth of the matter is, you don't always have to use InDesign to produce your presentation. So as an example, let's say that you're doing a single presentation board, and this is just a concept sketch of a single presentation board. Now notice I haven't even gone in InDesign yet. This is just a chicken scratch sketch of the fact that I'm going to have a title here and a bar here. And then on this sheet, I'm going to have a section here, and I'm possibly going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different sections. I don't know what these scribblings are, but I know that I want to do it. Now for these single page documents, InDesign, single page, it's good for that. Another thing it might be good for, let's say that you need to do your thing in the form of a document. So you need to have different pages. You know, maybe you're going to print it and you're going to skip through the pages. Then InDesign is great for that. But then there are other scenarios now, like for example, if you want to maybe lay out presentation sheets. Now InDesign is perhaps good enough to do a single sheet, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend InDesign to do the entire layout of the sheet, or even necessarily to do all the sheets. And the main reason for that, if you look at this sketch, this is an interesting sketch. It's actually a screen clipping that I took, right? Where in the background, this is actually in Illustrator, right? And within Illustrator, because it isn't so rigid in terms of a document layout, for example, here, it isn't so rigid in terms of how it lays out its document. You can strategically position your entire composition of your architectural sheet and sketch over it. Notice I haven't gone into InDesign or Illustrator yet. I'm just simply assuming that maybe a timeline can fit up here, maybe a plan can fit here, maybe I can have different, I don't remember what this was, and different images. But the important thing is I'm able to have a broad view of all the sheets. And I've seen other persons do this in even AutoCAD. There are even persons who, I see persons doing it in Photoshop as well, though I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. But anyway, believe it can be done as well. But whatever it is, you need an application that gives you a broad view. Now, InDesign is great at individual view, pages or spreads. A spread is, for example, what you saw a while ago, the example with Nicole, where you open up the sheet and you see a large picture spread. But when you're talking about a sheet set, InDesign is not necessarily the best program for that. But then nowadays, let's not forget about COVID. We're not necessarily printing now. So then we're also talking about digital video presentations now. And of course, well, you're out of luck because no InDesign there. And I know I'm presenting on InDesign, but I have to talk about presentations on a whole. Especially that today that we are doing everything digitally. If you're going to do InDesign, well, I figure most of us would know that, okay, you don't want to use it for for video. But if you're going to use it for digital, then you want to stick to individual sheets or documents, multi-page documents. Those work. What about hybrid? Well, we're not doing this again now, but I just want to touch on it because there are presentations that I see when some of you guys have a screen and then you have prints around it. Well, these individual prints could be done in InDesign. So that's another use case scenario. And then the screen would be maybe some other application, Lumion or what have you. And of course, you have PowerPoint. And the reason I have to stick a PowerPoint icon here is because naturally when you design your single sheet here, you can just drop it in PowerPoint, right? And drop them on different slides. The point of the matter is that InDesign allows you to frame out what this document is. And I'm going to jump and show you some examples now. I just added this one little thing here to say how you go through your presentation also matters. So in the case of a document, you'll be going, you're dealing with pages and spreads. And in the case of a sheet, maybe you're just doing individual sheets, left to right, or it's different slides. Okay, so for example, in InDesign, and if I just kind of wipe the slate clean here, there we go. Just to give you a quick preview, this is what the InDesign will look like, for example. And this is the setup because I do a demo of this for class. But in a nutshell, this is what it would look like, where you have different pages and you're able to add new pages. Now, this is not a tutorial per se, so I'm not going to go very specific in terms of the pages, but pretty much when you add multiple pages, this is what it looks like. And you can, of course, change the layout to single pages or so forth. But the framework of how you interact with InDesign is like this. It's very much like a document, kind of, like Word. You can actually view Word like this as well. And you pretty much pan around and zoom around like you would in the other Adobe applications. Now, the key difference comes in how do you choose to use it. Now, remember the steps that I showed you a while ago. Before you even jump here, you should have already done these things already. So at least you would have a point where you have a sketch of what your individual page or document would look like. So I'm just going to go here and say, okay, so let's say this is what my sketch should look like. And these are just, as I say, some funny little sketches, but maybe you have a image here and a title here, some text here and an image here and so forth. So, well, when you're in InDesign, all you really need to do is you're basically creating text and frames in which you insert your pictures in. So if I need to create a frame, I can just use the frame icon here, which is default to a rectangle frame. And I can say, all right, I'm going to have an image here. Now, remember, you're not just making this up arbitrarily. You're going according to your concept sketch, which you already have created from over here. Let me just drag this over there like that. There you go. So let's say that you're creating maybe this frame here, right? Let's move that out of the way. Well, then if you are in InDesign, then you say, okay, I want to have a picture over here. So I'm gonna move this over here and drag that down here like that. And then I'm going to have some text over here, maybe a title. So you use your text tool and you would put your title here, title. And then maybe I'm going to just jump and use some shortcuts here in the interest of time. Let's make that a little bigger. And then maybe you will have maybe a body of text here. And then you're going to maybe have two bodies of text. So you might draw one body like that. There we go. And have another body of text like that. There we go. And as a matter of fact, usually what you would do is you would use what's called placeholder text. Now, I know it sounds weird to design what the body of your text looks like, but when you're dealing with lots of words, that is a key part in your presentation. So a good site that you can go to help design how you lay out bodies of text would be Lorem Ipsum, Loraim Ipsom. Do I have that right? LOREMIPSOSUM, right? Which is lorem ipsum is, I call it professional gibberish text. And what it does, it just gives you some generated bodies of text. It's really gibberish that you can copy. So if you think that you will need this amount of text, you just paste it in there. Now, the great thing about InDesign is that, for example, this is the body of text that you have here. And I'm going to show you, I'll tell you a very important point with laying out your document or your sheet. Now, if you're working as a group and maybe one of you is doing the introduction to this document or this sheet, or I don't know, the site plan or whatever it is, you want to make sure that the person who is doing it does not design their words to be more than or less than what you have here. You need it to be about the same amount of words. And this is the good thing that InDesign allows you to do, because you basically would have already designed the space that the words will fit in. And literally, you can think of InDesign as the ability to design how words are presented or how documents are presented. It gives you way more flexibility. So for example, I would grab my image. I would grab my image from, here we go. Right. Right. So let's say you did this beautiful rendering in Photoshop. You would grab your image from Photoshop, which I do have it somewhere here. Here we go. Right. So you'd grab your beautiful rendering that you did in Photoshop with all of the layers of compositing and all of this great stuff that you saw earlier, and you would just drop it in your frame here. There we go. And it just drops nicely in there. And then maybe you say, okay, it's perhaps too big. You would double click and oops, there we go. You would just, actually, you would just try and resize this a little bit more. Let's resize it this way. Come on, where is my icons here? There we go. So, oh, there it is. There's that brown layout that you see in there. Sorry that my screen is jumping all over the place, but there it is right there. And what InDesign helps you do is to just keep organized with your spacing, right? Because if you think about it, it's really meant for teams working on document. And you can't just decide that, oh, all of a sudden, I want to change the size of this image. It's going to impact the text that you have decided to put here. So InDesign kind of keeps you focused and organized in how you present your single page or document. Now, okay, question?
As it pertains to backgrounds, would you make a frame and make it a background also, or is there a special way?
All right. To answer that question, I'm just going to jump to the examples here. So for example, let's look at something that's a bit more architecture related. So let's look at this architectural report here. Now, this is a cover page here, and it looks very architecturally, there. And let me scroll down to see if I can find a background. So for example, things like image, that's laid out like that. Let me try to find one that would, okay. Look at this, like a photo. So this frame has a photo, and look at how the text is organized here. So InDesign really helps you to keep your text laid out just fine. And if you you can put frames in as a background and move it to the background. Another example would be this example here, which is a manifesto case study I did, ironically, on Neoscape, which is a 3D visualization firm, international. And so just like how you saw a kind of a magazine-y kind of layout where there is graphics and text and background. This is where InDesign would shine in how you lay out these things, right? And each of these things here are really links, just like how you saw me dragging that photo. It doesn't store the original photo in InDesign, but instead it links directly to the image. So as I say, InDesign basically keeps that linkage to the heavy lifting that was done in these other applications. Only in scenarios, remember the scenarios that InDesign shines in, which is documents, or maybe single page, or maybe if a page is a part of a much larger distribution of pages, then that is where you would use some of the techniques that I showed you there. All right. So this is just kind of a quick kind of overview of how you would use it. As I said earlier, we don't really need to dive into any technicalities. Literally what I showed you about setting out a frame, dragging in your images, organizing your text, that is mainly what you're going to do with InDesign. So you won't see me telling you about layers or maybe about, even though it has a pen tool, I wouldn't be telling you about drawing like a floor plan in InDesign. Yes, you can, but it wouldn't be recommended. It's best that you draw those plans in an architectural program and then manipulate it in a more friendly vector program like Illustrator. All right, so what I want to leave you guys with as I wind down is I just made some notes here during even the previous presentations, which, as I tell you guys, I really enjoyed it, and I'm glad that you guys are doing this thing. I think visualization is a very big topic. It's a hot topic, especially in CSA. I want to just highlight three areas here for you. So you have the traditional practice of architecture. Then you have architectural visualization specialists. And then you have, I would call, say, computer graphic artists, persons who do like marketing work, brochures and designs and stuff like that. And I just brought up these 3 points because I saw traits of each of the presentations that went earlier. I saw traits that are mentioned here. And I think one of the important things that you guys need to have, especially if you're developing or charting your path, is where do you fall and what are your major targets and minor targets. So for example, in the field of the traditional practice of architecture, what is more promoted is things like design and construction and detailing and even the administration of architecture. If you hear from most like I would say famous architects, they tell you that they spend more time in Excel than even around, in a drawing. And it's perhaps true because, administration is a big part of architecture, the designing, when does the contractor comes in, and which part of the building will be built first and just a whole sort of things. But notice some of these things that we mentioned earlier: architectural illustration, photography, 3D visualization, even presentation. Those things are a part of the practice of architecture, but it's not necessarily the dominant factor. However, if you are a visualization specialist, and this is a field that this is an area that I am in, and I see, well, traits of you guys also in that kind of field, then look at how the priority is kind of swapped around, so it's more about the illustrations and the photography and the presentation, communication of architecture, and it is less about construction, definitely not about administration of architecture and these things. But it also has a couple of things from another trait. It had things like graphic design and illustration, because you guys are talking about InDesign and Illustrator and all these things. So even the computer graphic artists, some people say CG artists, some people say graphic artists. So for example, Nicole Williams is a graphic artist, right? And the graphic artist would focus more on these things, graphic illustration, but even in movie, film, video editing, environment artist. So you're painting. I saw some beautiful digital painting there. Even things like character animation for those who focus in that, cartoons. Don't know if you've ever seen like the Cabby Taxi cartoon that was Jamaican made. Is a form of graphic design as well. So it's just for us to know where we're heading, what we like, and it will help us to kind of decide what direction we want to head. I just wanted to add that piece to you, that it can help you guys to, make up your minds for the future. So that is the end of my presentation, which perhaps wasn't as much about InDesign, but more on the broad topic of architectural presentations. All right, any questions?
Hello?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Curtly.
Yes, sir. Currently from previous Mac. How would they go about getting InDesign?
Well, I mean, InDesign is available for Mac as well. As a matter of fact, Adobe and Mac are like,
Best friends.
yeah, they're like best friends. So it's not a situation you have to worry like AutoCAD, where the AutoCAD for Mac is a different species than the AutoCAD for PC.
Completely different species.
Exactly. Okay. But for Illustrator, in all the Adobe products, all the Adobe design products as well, I would say, they're pretty much almost the same, literally. They're literally almost the same, right?
Okay, but would you have any links for us to get it?
Yeah, man, you have links, man. And I don't know if you remember, I usually do all my links through Mr. Campbell, who I normally give out the number. Right. So he will give you the hookup.
Okay, definitely. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Sir, just one question. Recently I was working on a group project in InDesign, and I wanted to be able to work simultaneously with other people. I was just asking, is it possible that you can share files like with Revit? I know you can collaborate. Can you do that in InDesign?
Well, InDesign allows you to work collaboratively in two ways. The first immediate way is because it uses frames and it doesn't really house the work, but rather it links to the Photoshop file, to the Illustrator file, to the PDF file, to the JPEG file. You can divide the work that way, where there's somebody else working on the Photoshop file, but you are working on how that file fits into the document or that one sheet, right? So that is one way that you can work collaboratively. There's another more advanced way, and Nicole would perhaps be more the person that uses this feature. But a part of the Adobe suite, there is an application called InCopy. And what InCopy is, it is like a little baby brother to InDesign. And the person who is doing the writing, right, the editor, the person who is actually writing the article, they would be in InCopy, typing away, and the words would appear in InDesign. And in InDesign, you have the graphic artist. So you have Nicole in InDesign laying out the graphics and arranging the fonts. But at the same time, you have Mr. Romain Marshall that's doing this beautiful compositing in Photoshop. And that is being linked into the InDesign document. So I don't know if that kind of paints a picture of like an ideal collaborative scenario for InDesign. But only one of you can use InDesign at a time. So if there are two people using InDesign, it's not like they're going to link together like with the collaborative features in like a Revit, right? You have to link via other sister or brother applications. All right.
Okay, thank you.
Okie doke.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Williams.
Okay, no problem.
Before we move to Adobe Illustrator, Nicholas Gordon will be presenting shortly on Procreate, which is mainly for iPad.
All right, good night, guys. Can I have the opportunity to share?
Yes, you should be able to.
Yeah, go ahead. I stopped sharing.
Okay, good. All right, good night. Let me know if you see my screen.
It's visible, yes.
Yeah, I'm
Okay,
seeing
good.
it.
All right. My name is Nicholas Gordon. Recent graduate of the Caribbean School of Architecture, bachelor program, now currently working in the field of architecture and architectural visualization. Tonight, I'll be as concise as possible. We're gonna go through a few key things that I believe everyone should know as it relates to Procreate. I went paperless around 2019, the summer of 2019. I haven't had a sketchbook after that, even in school. The iPad was my main source of getting any form of ideas out two-dimensionally, as well as representing things even on a three-dimensional level. I've tapped into that as well. Tonight, though, we're going to be focusing mainly on the powerful program called Procreate. And this is what it would generally look like as it relates to your 2D space. What it really does, it does all the things that Photoshop would do, a little of what Illustrator can do as well. But it does it in a more intuitive way. If you are someone who is not necessarily inclined to using a mouse to do certain things, or even if you have gotten used to using a mouse, using the Apple Pencil really opens up a whole nother level of fluidity and really using the best case as it relates to hand-eye coordination, because we all took up a pencil or a pen before we clicked a mouse. Well, maybe this generation probably different, but I know for me, I took up a pencil or a pen before I ever started to click a mouse. So that became second nature to me. So using the Apple Pencil and the iPad has really opened up a lot of doors for me as it relates to speed and efficiency. And we're going to get into some of the things that really create those efficient processes. So the first thing is, an iPad is your digital sketchbook. Now, we have an array of pens here. We have an array of different tools that we have to our disposal. When I'm doing general sketching, I will use my final tip or the studio pen, depending on what exactly I want to create. Say we're going to create a box, simple box. It's really, it brings your ideas to life a lot faster, maybe. And also the ability to have it and also be able to use it and manipulate it is really what makes it a game changer as it relates to sketching, getting your ideas out, as opposed to traditional pencil and paper. So utilizing it as your sketchbook really can help to get your ideas out there as fast as possible. Now, moving now to layers. So I have a project here that is just a simple concept sketch or concept diagram of a residential dwelling. So essentially what was used here is a series of layers, similar to how Photoshop or any other layer-based program would operate. That's essentially how Procreate presents the information to you in layers. So this opens up a whole new thing. So it's no longer just for rough sketching. It's now able to create dimension, able to create form, and also be able to trace and really create different opportunities for tracing. So let's say I've drawn this and I can just create, just by dragging a color into that layer, that now becomes a trace paper layer, and I can draw over that. Say I want to develop this box a little bit more, maybe add a few different things to the box. And we are doing that all without really tampering with the original base idea. So sometimes some of these squiggles that you might do in the initial phases, they might eventually develop into design. So we don't want to lose that, and we don't want to feel too restricted, as you would probably with a traditional book. When the pen goes to paper, it feels very permanent. But with this opportunity now that you have, you can be able to manipulate it in different ways. So now we're going to look at the selection and move tool. Now the selection and move tool is found up here to the left, depending on how you orient it, but this is the stock orientation of the app itself. Selection tool. So we have a number of things down here. We have automatic, which it works similarly to how it would work in Photoshop. Let me just show you an example of each of these here. All right, so let's say we're on this layer here and I want to do an auto selection. I would just tap that and I'm able to manipulate this now in many, many different ways. But this layer now is selected as a block or as a color. So whatever pigment or color you put in, we can change that. See, we have it selected there. We can change it to red. And a quick and simple thing is to use both fingers. You might not be able to see that, but both fingers simultaneously will be able to create an undo. So it's really, really easy to get into designing, get into flowing and really moving forward with the design process and then furthering it into architectural visualization. Moving on now, using a similar example, if I were to select freehand, I can get really free form. I can get very, very close if I needed to. Say you're cutting out a person, an entourage, you can get really, really close and cut it out using a pencil-like tool. So a lot of times we get kind of deterred or well, I know when I was in school and I was using Photoshop, and I really needed to select something, it would be painstakingly long to select at times, depending on, there are different ways where you can speed up the process, yes, but sometimes the marquee tool or the freeform selection tool works best for certain applications, and you would want that to be a lot more intuitive. This allows you now, even if you tie this in with a workflow of Procreate and Photoshop, to just cut out your stuff in Procreate and then drop them into Photoshop, depending on what you want to do with the project. That can also be some options there. Another selection tool is the rectangle tool, selects as a rectangle. We also have the ellipse, selects as an ellipse, and all of these can be filled by just simply picking the color up here. And there is any form of color you would ever want. You have different displays, you have the disc. I personally go with the classic because I can be able to manipulate the brightness as well as the hue, and the saturation and as well as the hue. So it really gives me the best options as it relates to color manipulation within this classic mode here. You have harmony here, you have value, and you have your different palettes. So I've done some presets, some colors that I use all the time. So I've put them here in my palette section. Again, we're gonna use the double tap to undo, and that's a simple undo. Now we have quick lines that I'm gonna show you now. Good, quick lines. All right, so a quick line. So we're gonna go here, Studio Pen again. Over here, we can manipulate the brush size. You may have known, you may not have known that. And also the opacity of the brush itself on this side as well. So let's say we go with a fairly medium brush, Studio Pen. If I were to draw this line, it's pretty wavy. And then if you hold it there for a second, it snaps, and then you have a complete straight line. So this can really help when you need a straight line, and you don't necessarily want to feel as restricted as it would be to use a ruler, because I've actually used rulers on the iPad as well. But this feature really doesn't, it necessarily lets you not be able to use rulers as often but that is a benefit to you because a screen is not necessarily the best place to be sliding around a foreign object that is not made for it. So this really helped as it relates to getting straight lines without a ruler. Boom, boom. Also, we have the shape, the quick shape. So let's say I want a circle. That's not the perfect circle, but if I hold it again, I get a circle and I'm able to manipulate that in many different ways. Also, if I go here to edit, it's an ellipse now. They know it's an ellipse because even when I did it, it was not a perfect circle. If I select circle, it then forms it to the exact parameters that a circle would need, which is to be complete. So that's another option there. You can always toggle and untoggle this to get different options and manipulate it in different ways. All right, so that was selection. That was quick line and quick shapes. Now we're gonna go into perspectives a bit now. Perspectives, you go to the thing that looks like a wrench. This is your actions toolbar or action tools. So we have a lot of options here. We have add, if you want to add images, it's all here. If you want to copy and paste something, insert a file, insert a photo. Canvas. So we're going to focus on canvas now as it relates to perspective. Drawing guide, right? So right now I have preset on it, a 2D grid. And when I go into my layers, right, I just click on the layer itself, and what it does is it gives me an array of options. We have rename, we have fill layer, we have all these different options, alpha lock. So similar to things that you may see some things here, maybe they're worded a bit different, but they're very similar to stuff that you'd see also in Photoshop. Now we have drawing assist. What this does is on that particular layer, it locks me into this 2D grid. So I'm not able, even if I try, I'm not able to draw anything other than a horizontal line or a vertical line. So this really helps as it relates to designing again. When you want just a series of frames maybe, or something that you really need to be in a block, maybe some floor plans, if you're working on some floor plans, just to get some quick walls in. And it really is a game changer as it relates to getting things done faster, which is always something that I'm looking towards or looking forward to. All right, now, so within that same thing there, we have the edit drawing guide, and we can get a lot of different options now. We can get isometric, which essentially what it does is, if I'm to select that now, on this same layer, we have drawing assist, right? I'm able to go horizontally and also on the isometric axis. So we can create some isometric boxes, quick and easy, minimal effort, easy, without me even having to really think and try to get these angles accurate. All right, we also have the perspective tool, which what you do is you would select your perspective points, max opacity, perspective. So one perspective point can be out here. We can do another one out here, and boom, and boom. So a basic 2-point perspective. You can also manipulate the color of the line itself. I like to keep that as a blue and a purple, because those are colors that are easy to see. Good. Let's just increase this so it's less in the background. All right, and what this does, but we always have to remember to put on our drawing assist on that particular layer. What that does is it locks me into whatever perspective line is on that side. So not drawing anything in particular here, just showing you how the program really fixes you and locks you into those different perspective vanishing points. All right, we're moving nicely along. Now the next thing I want to show you is the color fill and selection tool and how that really plays into each other. Before we saw, let me just take off the drawing guide. All right, so before we saw how the selection tool was used, we have the freehand or freeform one, we have the rectangular one, we have the automatic selection, and we also have the ellipse or circular selection. If we go back into selection and we click ellipse, it automatically selects that area and eliminates or erases or doesn't take into consideration the rest of the canvas. So if I am to simply hold this color right over here on the top right and drop that into the selection. Hold on, sorry. I have to show the layer. Let's get another layer for that. Drop that in, it automatically fills in right there. So that's an easy way to fill and block in color. Say you want a particular wall, and this selection will always be there. And a way to manipulate the selection is to hold down the selection tool, and you can click the word remove, go to rectangle or anyone. And what that does is it removes that area from the selected area. So it really opens up a lot of ways that you can use this to detail select something. So let's say something like that, like a half circle. Sorry about that. Like a half circle. It's now only a half circle. So it really lends you the option to basically do anything as it relates to selection. Let's now move into the other topic, which is the different brushes. Now, there are many brushes, and the brush library is extensive as is. I would say you have quite a bit, or you have quite a few brushes that will be useful to you all the time. For one, in inking, as I said, I use the fine tip for when I'm just starting out to flesh out the idea, or the technical pen. And when I want to get more solid blocks or thicker lines, I go to the studio pen. Now, there's also something that I use all the time, which is the airbrush. The airbrush, I use it to manipulate. I use it also, whatever you use to brush or to create a mark, you can also use that as a erasing tool. So whatever you use in the positive can also be used in the negative. So let's say we have this here, and I want to use the airbrush as an eraser. I can literally erase it with the airbrush itself. And the pencil allows me to use different pressures so that I can really have full manipulation of what's going on in a quick way. So for me to click and to do simple things like getting this fluid, you would need some more level of experience with the mouse to get that manipulation properly. So the freedom it really lends me, it is really the greatest value, because I can get simple gradients like this in no time, right? So that's something that probably would take a little bit longer. I'm not sure how advanced you are, but for me, it's a lot faster to use the Apple Pencil in Procreate. All right. I also have some architectural pens that I've downloaded. Actually, I paid for this brush set, but there are many brush sets that you can get online that you don't have to pay for. So there are stairs in this brush set. Let's say we want to see this stair. Let's get another layer. Boom, and I have a stair that I can select, manipulate, all right, do all kinds of things with. So it really is just a full repertoire. I mean, nothing is out of bounds. You can even create brushes if you choose to dabble into that. So for creating floor plans, we have lights. Let's go into that. Lights for the sketching. We have other brushes like plants. So say you want some plants, and it multiplies at different sizes as well to give you some variation. All right. We also have furniture, which is really crucial for getting some floor plan developments out really quick. Toilets there. We have dining tables here. So a lot of different options, and each of these can be selected again using the freeform or freehand selection tool. After you've selected that area, you click up here on your top left, delta pointer, and then this is manipulated separately even while being on the same layer. as you just saw, of all of the things that I've just created. So this itself can be scaled up, scaled down, and it can be manipulated separately from the layer. But then, as you can see, it's right back on that same layer. All right. Some entourage I think I have as well, and some pattern hatches like earth. Sorry about that. Yeah, to create different patterns and some tiles. So it's really a fun program for you to explore. You have some hexagon patterns here. So, I mean, all of these are available as well on different websites. I can probably I can send some, I would have to go back and look because I downloaded these a while. I can send Bonita some of these brush sets or where to find them so that whoever
Thank you
would be
so much.
interested. Yeah, so that whoever would be interested can get that. So we have beds here. And again, they can all be manipulated and sized whenever you're ready. So this for me was a game changer as it relates to my sketchbook. So my sketchbook, I normally always buy a sketchbook. Sorry to go back to the first point, but I always buy a sketchbook and try to fill it out. And it's usually kind of difficult sometimes. This now, I actually find the opposite, where I'm finding it hard to really decipher what really makes it into my sketchbook because there's so much options and so much different things that I can show and cut up different things and present them in a way that it's more legible and more understandable to my lecturers and whoever would see them. So it's really, really good as it relates to being able to get your ideas out again in a very fluent and easy way. So that was brushes. We're gonna go now into hue and saturation. So similar to how you would do in Photoshop. All right, let's say we have this green wall here. Let me select another green wall. This green wall down here, all right? I can go here to the adjustments. We have a plethora of adjustments as well. We have color balance, curves, gradient maps, Gaussian blur, motion blur, perspective blur, noise, sharpening, bloom, glitch. All these that are here to our disposal as it relates to these adjustments. So for this particular one though, if we go into hue, saturation, and brightness, for this particular layer, we have saturation, which you can see it's losing saturation and gaining saturation as I move the slider. So it comes preset at 50%. You have brightness as well. You can see it goes pure white or pure black. We'll bring it back to around 51, no problem. For me, when I'm working with these, I normally round them to 7 threes. I find like, for 7s or 3s, it's just a personal thing. But I find that it works the best for keeping me not as confused. Because if it doesn't work for 3, then it probably will work for like 6 or 7, depending. Or even if it's not a whole number or 0, I'll bump it up to 3, then I'll try 7. So here as well, the color completely changes based on where you slide it on the slider. So let's say I had it at 50%, which 50% would be the original color, right? So it's more of a, let's say teal or green. And I want it to now be red. I can slide it back down to red and it becomes red without me even having to make a whole new red, which is pretty simple as well. As I said before, we can go here to red and we can just drop it onto that layer itself. So it's just another level of manipulation as it relates to the color that I'm just trying to show you that it also can do similar things to what Photoshop can do. Another thing is the multiple blending modes. So if we go here into layers and click all these different blending modes. So similarly to what Romain was showing you before, it's essentially the same thing. So we have overlay, we have all these different options, difference, including subtract, divide, hue, saturation, luminosity. So it's really very similar now to Photoshop. I wouldn't say it's as powerful, but basically what you would ever need for a basic sketch or to represent some form of architectural visualization. You can find different ways in Procreate to manipulate that, which I'll be showing you further on into the presentation. All right, so now that we've done that, we also have the option to video our every move, our every stroke, our every line that we draw back here in time-lapse replay. So before you start the project, you want to ensure that this is toggled on or off. Don't purge. I have it toggled off because whatever I did a while ago, I don't want it to be recording. But this is essentially starting from the basics, and a lot of the tools you can see are used here. I use a 2D grid, so it kept me very horizontal and very vertical. So I'm not that good at drawing perfectly straight lines. So this is not all me drawing perfectly straight lines. You can see a lot of the color blocking as well. And a lot of the difference in push and pull and form that I'm using to create the overall composition. That car, that BMW, vintage BMW, is actually, I didn't draw that from scratch. It's actually a brush that you brush and then you can now manipulate and scale. Good. All right, so we're gonna move into project that I can show you. Hold on. All right, good. Everybody seeing same way? I hope so. All right, so what happened here? There was
Yeah,
an
we're following.
existing. All right, good. There's an existing site. This is what it looks like. All right, and we're trying to propose something there. The person asked me, "Boy, I want to show this and whatever." So fine. After that, now I'm gonna take you into the layers. So the render was done in Twinmotion, right? To get all of these that you see in there. So that's the Twinmotion layer. We added the lighting, different things to it. We even added some small leaves to create more inclusion as it relates to making it feel more real, like it's actually there. So this is the background. So again, the image was taken and then everything else was overlaid onto that. So the lights here, and then there's actually a cool tool that you actually get lights into your brush set, which is luminance. So let's say you want a flare, you just touch and you get the flare. Hold on. Touch and you get it. Wait. I'm above that layer. Sorry about that. Good. So we touch anywhere and we have a lens, like a kind of a lens flare vibe. We have the light leaking. We have the light pen, which you can maybe play with getting some LEDs, or, I mean, the possibilities are endless. It's just for you to really explore. After all of that, sorry if I'm moving a little bit fast, but it's basically what Matthew would have presented in the first thing as well. So it's just the same principles of the composition, getting the things that you need in the assets. This is a person that I put in here. So the shadow, again, as I think it was Romain that was explaining before, but all I did was I duplicated this layer, selected it, then I went to this down here. You can go here, but what I also tend to do is to go back into my adjustments and go into what I showed you before as it relates to the hue and saturation, and that turn the brightness all the way down, turn the saturation all the way down. And what that does, it creates a total black silhouette. So this can also help with your entourage. Say you found somebody that is doing a perfect pose and you want that in your project, but the person isn't black and white, or it isn't a complete silhouette, you can manipulate and use that as well. If I wanted it also to be white, all then I would have to do, because it's already black, is to put or select the white color and just drop it in. So the color drop and all these things is really making things a lot faster for us. And to get a shadow position right here, you have different ways you can manipulate this the form as well. we have distort, which is what I would probably use. So just kind of flatten it out, play with it a bit so it makes sense, just to kind of get some general ideas. So it's really using your knowledge of what really works and what happens in real life and trying to get it done in a quick, efficient way, intuitive way with the Apple Pencil, with the Procreate program. Boom, and then we get our black shadow here that we have. All right. Some more leaves again, just getting all these PNG images, cutting them out, whether it's automatic selection or whatever it is. There we go. And yeah. So this is pretty much an example of how you can use Procreate for your projects. It doesn't necessarily always have to be a sketchbook thing or unfinished thing. You can render things and also put them in and include them in images as well. Since getting the iPad and using Procreate, I have really not used my computer for visualization. What I use my computer for mainly is to get the renders out and then quickly get them out of the computer and onto the iPad, because that's where I feel my most creative. So I hope this presentation helped you guys. And that's the end. Thank you guys for listening. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Yeah, I have a quick question.
Sure.
I'm wondering why use Procreate instead of Photoshop for iPad or for visualization. I understand it as a sketching tool, but I think programs like Concepts or Morpholio might be better for elevations, for example, and Photoshop might be better for visualization. I'm just curious what you think the advantages of Procreate are over other programs.
Okay, so a main advantage, as I said, would be, sorry if I didn't make it as clear, but it would be just the intuitiveness of it to use the Apple Pencil itself on a screen. You're actually real-time editing stuff with the contact of the pen onto the screen. Now, if you have a Wacom or you have a tablet that you can hook up to Photoshop, then that's fine. That's also very, very intuitive. But I find that as a one-stop shop that can do everything, Procreate really has all of the things that you would really ever need as an architectural student to get things done in a fast and efficient way, and also a way that you may feel a bit more comfortable with. Because for me, when I found out about this, it was really a game changer because I could move a lot quicker than clicking the mouse and entering the commands. Yes, Photoshop is more powerful, but what you can do as it relates to creativity, maybe will edge out that in terms of the power of the program. But Procreate can do quite a lot as well. And to answer your question, it would be mainly for me, just the way how the program moves, the intuitiveness, the simplicity of the program. You can jump in and you can start right away. It doesn't feel foreign or odd. So that would be my answer for that question. I hope I answered it in a way that you can get something from it. All right. I heard somebody else was also.
Yeah, I wanted to know in terms of exporting into another program to arrange your sheets. So for example, if you're doing your sketchbook digitally via Procreate, how do you import the different, like, because what I'm taking this as is kind of like a board that you would have sketched ideas on. Do you make that same size as your sheet in InDesign, and or do you like copy it over, or is there a way to export it in order into InDesign?
There is a way that you can export from this program. You can export it in these different forms: Procreate file, a PSD file, a PDF file, a JPEG file, a PNG file, and a TIFF file. There are also animated things you can also export from this. What I did for my sketchbook, I exported each sheet when I'd finished arranging them. For say I'm doing a project, on a tower, for instance. I don't have any examples of that now, but on a tower, for instance, and I'm good with that sheet from a sketchbook, sheet 1 or sheet 2. I would then export that as a JPEG, all right? And I can save the image, I can put it in a different program. What I use Pages to get it in, and then I exported all that as a PDF and got it printed. So another thing is, if you want to do your sheets, what I did for sheets, I used a program called Affinity Designer, which that would probably need a whole nother talk about, but that is what I would definitely use for sheets. But I don't want to get into Affinity because that's a whole other thing, but I can probably just show you very briefly what the program looks like. So this will be very comparable to Photoshop. Let us see. Things can get a bit heavy though. Yeah, so this is something I actually did for school. So Williams might remember it. It's a visualization project that I did. So yeah, this has all the layers, and all these layers come from Procreate, essentially. Some of them come from this actual program as well, which this uses vectors. So if I need something vectors, I will more than likely come to Affinity Designer. If I also want to do a logo design, I would go to Affinity Designer as well. So that's just, but all of my sheets are here in Affinity Designer. So my concept for the towers thing, the sheets are here, and all the layers are in here. So I hope I didn't confuse the question.
No, it's okay. I just wanted to know how to like make a sketchbook out of all my different sheets.
Yeah,
Like
so
the little mini drawing paper thingies.
Yeah, so the easiest way I'd say is just export each sheet as an image and just put those images in Pages, and you can get that out. So it's essentially you just export all of these as boards. So you'd use them, or you would do your canvas size as the 11:8 or whatever size your sketchbook wants to be in the end, and you just export them as images.
Okay, thank you very much.
No problem.
Are there any more questions?
Yeah, one from me, Nick.
Sure.
Yeah, sure.
Just a quick comparison. Well, first, have you used Morpholio Trace?
Yes, I have.
So comparing it versus Procreate for architectural purposes, which would you edge out?
Okay, so if you're using it for scaled drawing, then Morpholio Trace completely 100% hands down is better for scaled drawings, because you actually have the ability to draw in scale. You have different tools that are more architecturally oriented. What I find is that although it works best, when I was in school, I used it to an extent, but then the monthly subscriptions and all of that really was a deterrent for me. Procreate is one time buy, you have everything and it continues to update, as well as the fact that if I'm getting something conceptual out, I will often draw for Procreate because it feels most like pencil and paper. But then if I want to develop something seriously on the iPad, I would use the Morpholio Trace. But by the time I would use my concept and get everything, it's time for the computer with the time crunching and everything for school. So I just really used Procreate first and then jump into the computer to see if what I'm actually thinking about is working. So that was my workflow, to keep it as simple as possible. But a workflow that I would actually recommend is Procreate, Morpholio, and then your computer, because you can actually export those scale drawings in Morpholio, from Morpholio, into your computer, your Revit, your ArchiCAD, your SketchUp, and trace over those and start to develop them in a computer program.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, bro. All right, any other questions, guys?
Yeah, I just want to say, very intriguing presentation. You know, I always think it's so interesting using the a workflow with the iPad, you know, it's just so interesting. Do you do you have like a Apple computer? Do you find that if you had an Apple computer, if you don't have any, the workflow would be better, or it doesn't
For
really
sure,
matter?
for sure. One thing I would want it for is airdrop.
All right, so it'll be easy.
Airdrop is a serious. All right, so I work where I work is Mac based. So if I'm doing anything for work, I can easily airdrop things across. But when I'm using my personal computer, I have to be emailing myself.
Oh man, that's
yeah,
horrible.
there are workarounds, but I just haven't gotten around to doing the proper workarounds. But it's not that bad, but it would be better if I was fully Mac based. But Mac based right now, as it relates to getting the strength of the computer that I need, the power,
Yeah, cost.
it's a lot of money.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Cool.
Just want to say what I've had to do. I've just uploaded it to Google Drive, and I've downloaded Google Drive on my computer. So when it uploads, it's right there in the folder, and I can.
That's an excellent way. Yeah, that's a good way. So there's the workaround right there. Good. Yeah. Or Dropbox too, or whatever. That should work as well. All right. Any other questions, guys? All right, if there's no other questions, then thank you guys for having me.
Thank you so much
It was
for
a real
coming. It was
pleasure.
a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
No problem.
Yeah, so now to end the section, we're going to be doing the Adobe Illustrator with Ronnie K. McLaren. So Ronnie K., you can present.
Okay, hi, good night, everybody. My name is Ronnie K. McLaren, and I will be presenting to you guys on Adobe Illustrator, which y'all already know. So just let me know if you see my screen.
Yes, we're seeing.
All right, great. So a lot of the basics are really shared between Photoshop and InDesign, which you guys would have already seen. So things like opening the file, setting up your workspace, very similar with the ribbons and the tabs and so on. What I do love though about Illustrator, just starting out, is that the artboards I think are a little more flexible. And so right now I have a simple artboard, just one artboard on the screen. However, if I want to add more, it's just add. So let's say I have 8 sheets to present. And let's just pretend these are 24 by 36 by chance. And you can actually rearrange them however you want to have them. So if you want them to read side to side, up, down, all over, and choose the spacing, how many columns you want, and you can have that set up. And this is editable throughout the entire process. So you don't have to keep it how it is when you start out. So that's what I love in terms of just how flexible it is to set up my sheets and that jazz. Also, similarly, it uses a layers method. Yeah. So just like Photoshop, you have your layers. The ones on top are at the front. The ones at the bottom, same thing. And you can add them as you go along, name them, customize them, change the colors, all the things. Now, you'd recall from Mr. Williams' presentation, he mentioned that Illustrator is a vector-based software. So we're working with lines, we're working with crisp, sharp lines, unlike in Photoshop where you're working with pixels. So another advantage of using Illustrator is that you maintain line quality. Once you're exporting to PDF, you zoom in all the way, you're just going to keep having those crisp, clean lines, which is very good. Additionally, you're able to manipulate DWG, which is like CAD formats, in Illustrator as well as PDF. So it's very flexible in terms of line editing and vector work. So quickly today, I'm just gonna run through some of what I would call the top 5 things to know in Illustrator as an architecture student. My top 5 lifesavers. I've been using Illustrator since first year, actually, to do my first digital portfolio. And since then, I've just been learning it more. And YouTube is your friend, Google is your friend, everybody's your friend when you want to learn little things. So same way, I'm just gonna show you guys my top 5 favorite things or easy things that help me with my sheets and presentations for school. All right, so forgive me if it lagging a little bit, guys. It felt kind of heavy, but won't be long. So just an example, I use it with floor plans, getting it to the look that I want them to look. So normally I export my plans from Revit, normally already preset with the shadows and the floor color that I would want. And then once I carry it into Illustrator, I then edit it further, probably put in some context, label, north arrow. And if I'm doing like analytical diagrams, I'll put in those lines or blotches of color over the space and lower opacity to make it see through. So these are just some plans that were done in my 4th year. By the way, I am also a recent-ish graduate of CSA, currently also in the architecture work field and also doing my master's at the moment, also at CSA. So yeah. So right, so floor plans with Illustrator, I find it to be very quick and easy. And once you have that set of workflow from, if you work in Revit, ArchiCAD, wherever you do your base drawings in, even if it's AutoCAD, who knows? It's easy to just get those PDFs over and drop them and start working. So Illustrator, the basics. Now in this image here, it was a conceptual abstract photo montage that was done for one of my master's projects. And what was very significant here was the simple use of the lines. So over here, you have your pen tool or your line segment tool. Your pen tool really does similar to any pen tool, you just really draw whatever shape or whatever line you want to draw. So if you're tracing over something or just drawing a line anywhere, you use that. So I would start here. I'm gonna just draw a simple line and immediately, well, this line already had a stroke on it, but let's say I want to make that stroke, which is the line thickness, greater. I just have to, up the stroke here, and you can see the point changing, and lower it same way. Now, if I go to the stroke panel over here, though, there are more options to how you can actually manipulate that line. For instance, if I want to make it a dash line, easily just tick the dash line, and you can change the actual size of the dashes. So right now it's 12. You can change it to 6 if I want it to be smaller. You can change it to 20 if I want it to be bigger. And you can also change the spacing between those lines. So it's very good in just getting simple diagrammatic lines. If I want it to become an arrow, simply just choose from the select arrows here, drop an arrow on, I can change the direction easily, all over here in the stroke portion of the tab, which is really easy. So yeah, simple line manipulation. Additionally, if I wanted to use the same pen tool to get, for instance, a wind direction arrow, just throwing that out there, same thing, I would start, so I click, but normally wind arrows, as we know, are like curved or represented as curved arrows. So with Illustrator, all you have to do is really just hold down. So I know you can't tell, but I'm holding down on my mouse right now, and I'm able to drag and pull to get the curve that I want. And then I'm gonna press again, drag and pull again, and now I have an easy arrow, which could show wind direction, anything I want to do. So let's say, our wind arrows aren't gonna be gray, dash lines, probably a nice blue. I didn't have it selected, sorry. Yeah, I probably don't want a dash line, so I just have to turn off the dash. Increase the stroke, decrease the stroke, whatever I want to do. If I want to have curved edges, I can do that as well. And then just put on my arrowhead just to keep it, to show the direction of the flow. And I can also scale these arrowheads. So if I feel that I'm too big and not very cute, scale them down, scale them up to your liking. So it's very flexible in that sense in terms of lines and shapes. In addition, with the rectangle tool, it's really good for tracing things when you want to do so. So if I, for instance, had this, do this rectangle here, let's pretend it's a wall right now in plan. And I wanted to also trace another wall, but I can't manipulate the shape now because I already drew a rectangle. It's easy for me to just, for instance, draw the other wall right beside it. Of course, I'm rushing now, so you'd obviously make sure the thickness is similar, or even just copy this line to maintain the thickness. And once I use something over here called Pathfinder, which you can also find up at the window tab if it's not already over to the side. Once I open Pathfinder, after selecting both shapes, I can easily merge those two shapes. So Illustrator is very keen on merging shapes. If I said, please and please, leave out the door opening, and that's supposed to be in between the two walls. I can easily just draw a box. It don't matter what the box is, where it be, once it's in the right space. And I now have my wall as one common thing. I don't know if you can see the stroke outlined, but the wall is one thing. I can put a line weight on it so you can stroke on it so you can see. Right, so that's my wall. But let's say I forgot to put my door opening in. Select everything and subtract, and now I have that door opening in. So with this Pathfinder, it's been funny enough, I actually learned about this like very late in my Illustrator life, but very helpful. It's been a lifesaver when you're trying to manipulate something very quickly and you just want to get those shapes and those fills in. So that's another quick and effective tool that is useful for your architectural things. So now this was another qualitative piece I also did in masters right now last year. And with this, it was kind of supposed to give a sense of space, sense of the area. So there are some pictures montaged on the actual figure-ground map of the space and showing different things, which I won't get into now. But another thing that Illustrator is really keen for is its clipping masks. So this image here, which you're actually seeing in the sheet above, which is of this toaster bus and part of this building, this was the original image. Well, I've already made it black and white, but this is the original full image. Now, what I did for this image to get that crisp, clean outline was actually trace this image using my pen tool of what I wanted to maintain in the image. Now, for instance, if this was in Photoshop, because the background is kind of not as clean and not one solid color, I wouldn't be able to easily use the magic wand, which would be another easy alternative to get a background out in Photoshop. So what I did was drew a line using the pen tool and over where I wanted to cut. And easily, all I have to do is select the line I drew, the shape I drew, as well as the image. So to select two things, you just have to hold Shift, or you can easily just drag and you see the two things selected. And right click, make clipping mask, and it automatically erases or takes away. It only keeps what is in that shape you've drawn. So another shortcut to get a clipping mask is to do Control-7, and you can easily manipulate it and change it as you wish. Now, because as I said, Illustrator uses vector lines, this shape is within this line drawing. So if I was supposed to, like want to change the shape or edit it or modify it in any way, I can easily drag any of these nodes here and get it to change to however I want it to be. So very flexible in that way as well. And anytime I want to actually edit it while seeing the original image, all I have to do is double click on that. And it shows me the original drawing, so I can know how to edit the clipping mask further if I would like to do so. So that was really how I achieved just this piece of cutout right here. So for this image, so that's really how you use clipping mask in Illustrator. It's very easy. If you want to draw a circle, draw a star, any of the preset shapes or any custom shape you want to make, drop it on the image, the PDF, anything, and it will cut it out however you want it to do so. So now we've gone through lines, basic line techniques, as well as clipping masks. Next, I'm gonna get into image tracing. Now, this image here was an edit to a picture in Trinidad. That was for a study we were doing. And what I wanted to do, to the left here, you can see the original image. It was kind of dark, kind of just not how I wanted it to look for the presentation. Fine. So what image trace does is actually literally give you different options in how you can get other different effects from a single image. So, but of course, as I said, Illustrator keeps everything vector based. So I don't have the actual working file of the image trace. This is just the picture, the final result. But what I would do is go to image trace, which is over here because I already have it. But as I mentioned before, if you want to find anything, you just go to the top here. So I'd go and click image trace to bring it up. Now, once I have the image selected, sometimes depending on the size of the image, it can take a few seconds. But once I select the image, I can choose if I want it to be just an outline, black and white, grayscale, low color, high color, or auto color image trace. So just to give a quick example, I hope it doesn't take too long, of a black and white image trace. And depending on the quality of the image, it may or may not come out how you want it to look, but you can modify it afterwards. So let's say I want a low color image trace. Okay, y'all seeing this pop up, right? So I'm not gonna run it, but I did a low color image trace, which you can kind of see in the image beside it. So you can see that it kind of has that cutout, graphicsy, animated looking effect, which kind of added some more character based on the presentation I was doing to the image itself. And what actually happened is that each of these like blobs or parts of the image you're seeing are actually selectable shapes, which I could then change the color or select all the colors that were this color and change all of them one time. And I can actually determine how detailed I want it to be or how abstract I want it to be. So that's a very powerful way of using image trace. And for the sky, it was just a orange shape outline that I then lowered the opacity up to see the background and the clouds. But you can see that kind of cutout effect of the image that happened after the image trace was done. Now, another really effective way of using image trace, I know that's kind of out of this, well, no, not out of the sketchbook age, but I know sometimes we do some really cool sketches in our sketchbook, and then now with all these online presentations, we're like, geez, I'm only gonna get my sketch like under sheets, but also not looking very rough. I don't want to see the book in the background. I don't want to see my page. I don't want to see the, like, I want it to be a clean, almost like I sketched this thing in the computer. So here I have a scan I did of one of my pages of my sketchbook, very random sketch, don't make it just here for the example. But as you can see, it was from my book. You can see some like background noise and just stuff you don't really want to see when you carry the sketch to your sheet itself. My text, my words, all that stuff. But let's say I want to have this image on my sheet. So I'd click the image, also using the same image trace, but I want it to stay black and white. Just because it's already a black and white sketch. I just want to get the lines out. So I will choose black and white, which is this one here. And what it has done is actually turned the image into a line drawing. So what I can, so as you can see, it's kind of choppy looking as it is right now. But with these tabs here, you're able to actually edit it and allow it to show more detail or less detail if you want. Make it cleaner, make it more abstract if that's what you're looking to do. But basically you can edit it to get it to how you want it to be on your sheets. So let's say this is the detail I want it to be in. But the next thing is that, my sheets are not white, my sheets are gray. How am I gonna get this? So this is how it looks right now on my gray sheet. But I don't want to be seeing no white background on my sketch. That's not cute on my gray sheet. So what am I gonna do now to get this sketch alone on my gray sheets? Now with image trace, you can actually expand it, which allows you to actually see these lines and see this sketch as just paths. So you can zoom right in. That path is a clean line. I'm not tell no lie, it's a clean line, no pixels, no nothing. So they have basically converted your sketch to a shape, literally. But I still have my background. So how am I gonna get rid of that white background from my gray sheet? Well, what I would do is normally go into that, and you're actually able to select each shape, each color, each piece of that sheet or that drawing. And because I want all the white to go away, I select one part of the white, and once I select the same appearance, it's gonna select everything that is white on the sheet. Hope I'm not going too fast. But once I select all the white and then delete the white, all I'm left with is the content of the sheet. And now you're seeing that I have my sketch from my book, same so, but now it's just on my gray sheet background, which I wanted. However, me don't want the bag of words, I just want this piece of the sketch right here, or maybe just these two parts. Well, because it's an editable shape, once you double click and you're going into it and you're in that shape, you've isolated it and you're not able to edit it. I can just take out what I don't want. So I don't want these words. Don't want that. Don't want this. You just select what you don't want to have and it is gone. Right? And now I have a cleaner. Of course, with more time, I would clean it up better. Now I have a cleaner drawing for my sheet. But no man, this black is not popping on this gray sheet either. So now I'm able to actually, because it's a shape, I can actually change the color to whatever I want it to be. So if I want it to be green for some reason, because that's my theme, my sketch is now a green drawing, and you can clearly see how it can become more manipulatable with more time and with however your preferences are. Cool. So that's image tracing basics. And of course, as you explore more, you'll see that it's a lot more flexible. It can be a lot more flexible. Now, the third thing is making patterns. So one thing Illustrator is really keen on doing as well is creating patterns and doing so within those vector shapes that you would have been creating. So let's say, for instance, I want to use this grass creek pattern, which you can find on Google Images, anywhere online really. Just want to find a nice, even square block to use. Even from material palettes in programs, you can get those images and use that because it's really a material I'm making, but it's a pattern. I want to get this grass creek to be on a particular site plan I'm doing. So let's just pretend for now that my site plan is, I'm gonna just use a star to show that it's a random shape. Cool, it's here already, but obviously I'm not gonna use my star in real life, guys. Yeah, so I have this star here that's my site plan, and I wanna get this grass creek into this star. But all I have is an image right now. So what I would do is take this picture here. It's like literally 2 clicks. In window, they have something called pattern options. And over here in this drop-down menu, you have make pattern. I just literally click make pattern. Up here, you'll see it come up saying done, cancel, hit done. And now my grass creek is actually a pattern. So when I click on my star and I look in my swatches, you actually see the swatch that was just made. So that was the grass creek pattern. And I could have named it and all the things to customize it better, but you can see that it's now here. So now I want my star to have a grass creek filling. That's it right here. So now whatever shape you've made and whatever floor or fill that you've done, you can fill it with whatever material you'd like to do so. And you can change the scale of it as well easily by right-clicking, clicking transform, and clicking scale. If I want to scale just the pattern inside but not the star itself, you just have to uncheck the objects, keep patterns checked, and change the scale to whatever you'd like it to be. And you can actually preview it. So let's say I wanted it to be much smaller, 50% per se, then preview that, and you can see that it's gotten smaller in the star. So that's making patterns, very simple. All you have to hit is make pattern, and you're good to go, and change the scale to fit the drawing that you're doing. Now, the last tip, trick that I would like to share is just creating isometric illusions. So for this particular presentation, I wanted to explode my plans to kind of show how they were stacked because it had a basement, ground floor, first floor. And it was just easy to do. It was an easy way to kind of represent the different things happening on the floors in a diagrammatic way. So this was actually the ground floor plan before. This is it here now, but just in black and white. So how did I get it to actually turn or give the illusion of being an isometric view? Well, first, I have the 3 steps here. You select the image that you want to create that illusion with, the plan. And then you can see this first step here is to scale it vertically by 86%. So in transform, you go to scale, and because it's just the vertical plane that you're scaling, you would change just the vertical to, oops, I had this on 50 from the last thing, so let me change to 100 first. Right. So you change the vertical to 86. Cool. And it's actually previewed, so you can see that it happened already. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't have objects checked. I checked it off last time. So make sure you have the objects checked, right? And okay, so now you can see that the image looks kind of skewed, kind of squished, weird looking. Cool. Now the next step is to transform again, go to share. And because of the orientation I wanted, I would do it at negative 30 degrees. But if I wanted it to, for instance, turn the other way, then it would be positive 30 degrees. So it's on positive 30 now. So I'm gonna type negative 30. It's okay. Right? So we can kind of see that it's doing something. Still look weird, but just trust the process, y'all. So the last step is now to rotate it by 30 degrees. It's on negative 30 now, so I'm gonna change that to 30. And just like that, it's now an isometric looking floor plan. And it really helps to just, especially for doing quick diagrams or just representing how, even how I did it here, how the spaces are stacked, a very simple way of getting your plans to appear this way, even though it's not a literal isometric drawing that you're doing 30-30 and whatever. So yeah, so that's just an easy tip. You can just remember, if you can remember this, or if you want me to like share it or screenshot it or anything you want to do, once you do these 3 steps, you can get it like that. And these were just some of the ways that I continue to develop this isometric illusion floor plan explosion to show, for instance, where natural cooling and passive and active cooling happens in the building. Also, these arrows are made in the same way that I showed you earlier with the line tool and putting an arrow on them, and they're actually line editing options to make the ends taper like this if you want. Also over here, showing where the bathrooms were or wherever uses water systems, showing those water systems from the water tanks below. Honestly, guys, these images of the water tank were just, I typed in isometric water tank in Google and I got a PNG, and just like that, you know, I was able to drop it in, and it looks literally like it goes perfectly with the angle of the image. So it's really beneficial to be able to just know how to get that isometric illusion for your plans. And just over here, just more of that presentation, because everything you're seeing here was done in Illustrator from base images, of course. So this was just an image of my actual physical model. And with the pen tool, I was able to just trace out the different sections of my model and put a color over them, lower the opacity, and books, that's you ready to go just like that. Also putting on the text and so on was done in Illustrator. And also it was actually clipping masked, as I mentioned before. So there was more, probably my house was in the background of the image. I didn't want that to show for the presentation. So I just clipping masked around it to kind of just get that out of the image, put on my white background, my white sheet, and good to go. Same here with this model image. It was the early conceptual model representation. I just doing some shapes here to represent something that could look like glass conceptually, as well as some isometric trees, which were found on Google as well, to just kind of enhance the image to give them an idea of what's supposed to be happening. So although this wasn't the actual landscaping done for the project when it got to later stages, it was just to give them an idea that, yeah, there's going to be vegetation outside. You can get a peep of vegetation inside as well. And you can see some very tiny people if you look closely, just kind of moving around. They're a more abstract entourage, but it just gave a whole feel of what the project was going to be later down once it was developed. Y'all saw this already with the isometric illusion. And lastly here, or the last few things here, was an elevation that was done. Just a mix of drawing. Okay, so it was done on the actual Revit PDF. So a very black and white basic drawing, and just with some shapes, making sure I have my layers in the right order on the side over here. There are no layers in this particular file, but once I have my trees on a layer, for example, and my whatever ceilings are in the foreground, my entourage on its own layer as well, it really becomes helpful in just organizing the drawing and knowing what's in front of what, as well as labeling it to follow what's in each layer as well. And this is an elevation. This is the section of that elevation. So the facade you're seeing is right along here. So these people dining here are the same persons you're seeing dining along this elevation here. And then this is a section, the bigger section of that whole part of the building. So you're just seeing how the lines came in handy. I'm able to make my line weight thicker by just increasing stroke, 2 clicks. Put in some trees. Also, you can put fills in. They have more, the swatches allow you to access different kind of fills. So not just the colors that you're seeing right here, but also if you can go through this entire library, you find patterns, you find things that are graphical, things that look like concrete, things that give you different line textures, all the different things to make the image what you want it to be. And these lighting effects here were just done by drawing a shape and dropping a gradient on it. So of course, with more time, I could get into more detail, but that's just the basics of what you can do with Illustrator. And then here again, a bigger section before it was detailed like above, but just showing what was happening in the spaces. So you see the streets, the walls, the sun, the lines, all of these things are Illustrator lines. Even this arrow here was the same thing I did below, but I just put a blur effect on the line to make it look more soft, like actual wind flow or airflow would be in the space. So yeah, that's it for the presentation. That's my top 5 tips on what Illustrator can do for you as an architecture student. So thanks, guys. Are there any questions? What's that for the chat?
Yes, I have one question. Can you go back to the sections, the ones that you showed us in your example project? Yeah. Did you change the background and the white lines for the section, the drawing in Illustrator as well?
The black lines. Okay, so because I use Revit, I export my things as a PDF. So when I bring it in, it already doesn't have the white background that Revit would have on it. It just brings in the lines typically. So, but also what I did to cheat code for this project is I actually put a black image in my actual Revit file. So that was already in the file before I printed it out. So I didn't have to worry about it like, about getting my black background in afterwards. So cheat code as well, guys. If you want to get a background in from your drawing program, just get a black box or draw it somewhere, export it as a picture or the PDF, and you can put it at the back of that Revit drawing, whichever view it is, and now you have that background on. So once you export your drawing, you already have that done for you. You don't have to worry about getting into Photoshop and getting into Illustrator and getting that background on. So of course it becomes more tricky depending on the view type, the view style that you have, but it also depends on how you manipulate that view in Revit. If you use Revit, or I'm pretty sure it works similarly if you're using ArchiCAD as well. So yeah. And yes, guys, I'm now reading the chat. My classmates will tell you I preach. I am an Illustrator advocate because a lot of persons just don't know what or how versatile this program really is. So I'm really happy to just share it. Some of the these are just the basics, guys. Can really do so much. So yeah, definitely versatile. And yes, Hayden, you can also just adjust your graphic settings to manipulate the drawing in Revit as well. So as I mentioned before, for the last one, for these plans over here, this floor tone and the shadows and so on, and just even the wall fills, that was already done from Revit. So once I brought it in, it was just I just did my site and some context in Illustrator to add to it. So the more that's just my personal workflow, but I find that it helps. So the more you can do from your drawing program, if that's your vibe, the more it helps you once you get to the presentation stage of your drawings. So yes. Any more questions?
Hey, Ranike. Those are some excellent tips. Excellent presentation. I'm sure it
Yeah.
has motivated a lot of persons to at least try out Illustrator a bit.
Yes.
You know, it should be the architecture students' best friend, probably even more than Photoshop, because
It really should.
because of the lines, right?
Yeah.
As you are in the master's course, I don't know if anybody here is in the master's course, but usually at that level, everything is bigger. Buildings are bigger, there are more lines, there are just more resources required, especially if you want to, how your presentation is being done. So for those who are maybe already using Illustrator, what are any tips you have to help with the performance? Because maybe some persons would say, or at least I've heard in the past that they say, boy, it's too slow at times, and it really drags down the performance of the computer when you have all the sheets in. I don't know if undergrad would experience that necessarily, but I know if anybody's in masters and they have tons of sheets and tons of drawings. So what are some of your tips that you use to keep the computer from bringing the computer to its knees?
Okay, yes, great question. So something that I didn't really get into was the fact that Illustrator works with it can work with linked in files. So I think linking your files or keeping your files linked, because they come in automatically most times as a link. Keeping your files as a link will keep it as a smaller file as opposed to embedding the file in it. So if I could quickly probably drag a floor plan in so you can see. Oh. Okay, so this is just an example. So I just dragged in this floor plan, which was already done like this from in Revit, because as I said, I manipulated the program to get certain settings on it. But typically, if I left it regular, it would come in as a PDF. But as I said before, I had the black background on it, so you're seeing that from the PDF. But if you look up here, you'll see that it's a linked file. Which means that even if I update this plan, like if I keep changing it in Revit and I just like re-export as a PDF and save over that file, it will automatically update itself in my program. Now, what that does is that the file itself isn't carrying the weight of that particular link or that particular PDF that you have in. So for one, in terms of like just saving a computer from the stress or the struggle of running the program, that's a tip to just keep the file small, and once you know where your links are, which is on your computer somewhere, you can always find them and update them. That's one way in particular. Also, Illustrator has compression qualities as well. So if you're like, when you're saving the file, I have to do a save as, sorry guys. When you're saving the file, no, it's not here. All right, so there is a checkbox here for use compression that also helps to keep the file as low as I think it can be, as well as if I'm potentially like exporting it or saving it as a PDF, for example, it gives the option of, are you guys seeing this pop-up menu thing?
Yes, you can see.
Right, so in compression, you can really adjust the kind of quality or the small, like the size file that you're aiming for, or get it as low as you can possibly get it if it's like a struggle to save it or open it or stuff like that. I don't really dabble with her too much. I normally just keep the file's big, but if your computer is struggling, that's a way I know of like getting it down when you want to save it, for instance, to a PDF or compress the file a bit. Yeah, that would be my 2 tips in terms of your question.
All right, thank you very much, Ronike, for presenting. Thanks to all the presenters, really. It was a good meeting, I think, so far. Bonita, do you have any closing comments?
I just want to thank all the presenters for coming out. I know we went really over time, but I think it was necessary. It was a lot of content, and I think the students would have benefited from it. It's recorded, so I will be trying to send it out as soon as possible. So if you're interested in getting the recording, just let us know. Also, if you guys can follow the Instagram page for more updates on events and so on, that'll be good. I'll try to see if I can upload it to YouTube, but that might take a while. So if you really need the recording right away, just let us know. And yeah, thank you, Mr. Williams, for coming out. You didn't have to, but you did, so thanks. And thank you to all the presenters. So yeah, I guess have a good night. We'll see you guys soon.
Okay, take care, everyone. Glad to be here. Keep up the good work.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.